Okay. And you're going to bring the first slide? Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Again, thank you and welcome to this special session. I must say, this is the most awaited and one of the most impactful sessions, and it's kind of will be the concluding for the summit. We've chosen some of the sectors which are phenomenally important between Australia and India, and this is something which also defines the new India opportunity quite a lot. And also where Australia has a lot to offer as well. And this is all about showcasing Australian technologies, Australian capabilities, but how we can scale those opportunities into India and collaborate. So we've got advanced manufacturing being addressed with the help of Michael and Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center. We also will cover sustainable energy. And then we move on to circular economy, which is one of the favorite topics even in India and Australia, including the Prime Minister of India, who had special recognition of these technologies in Australia to leverage. And then we go into smart, sustainable infrastructure, which is something which is becoming part of all the smart city, scaled growth opportunities that we have in Australia as well as in India. India has got one of the largest number of smart city projects going on in the world. So this is an exciting session, and I'm really pleased that part of the summit we are bringing this together. I'm sure this will be one of the sessions will be streamed and also telecasted, webcasted quite a bit again. So on that note, again, I formally welcome on behalf of this summit, and I want to welcome Michael Sharp, the director at Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center, a great supporter and ally of AIIBC, someone who is very passionate about making things happen between Australia and India as well, a great friend of ours. Over to you, Michael.
Well, thank you, Irfan, and what a terrific event last night, the gala dinner. And I know how busy you and your team have very much been, but to bring people together. And we heard so much yesterday about Australia and India and growing these opportunities together. And we're seeing so much of that. I would just quickly like you to cast your minds back to just over 2 years ago when COVID first hit. And at the time, we had the Department of Industry reaching out to me and saying, what sort of capabilities do we have to make face masks? We might need some face shields. There's a chance it will close some of the state borders. Are we prepared for this? Well, we quickly did adapt. And what I'm pleased to say is we have some of the greatest research minds in the world right here in Australia. And very quickly, I was on the phone to Veena Sahajwala and said, we need these technologies. What could we do? And we connected very quickly with a GP clinic on the north coast of New South Wales. The doctors were in high demand, of course, but they were looking for personal protective equipment. And Veena quickly and with her team got on board and got engaged with the doctors and the team at this medical centre and quickly went about preparing and seeing what technologies could be developed, and that progressed. And now we went forward and we needed ventilators. Cast your mind to the New York Central Park, and we saw all the visions of pop-up hospitals going into New York Central Park, and the world was getting ready for this pandemic that was going to envelop all of us. But very quickly, Australia said, yes, we can make ventilators. And here at the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Center, we brought 27 manufacturing companies together to build an invasive ventilator. And we did that in a matter of weeks. So it proved to me that Australians do have the capabilities. We certainly have the enthusiasm. But the highlight for me was when the second wave hit. Thankfully, we didn't need the ventilators in Australia, and we still have them now in the national medical stockpile. But the second wave that came through India was very, very large, but we were able to send ventilators to India. So what a great opportunity. I think that's worthy of an applause to our great manufacturers. And now, as we are coming out of the pandemic, it's great to see the technology evolving And I know we're going to hear from Vina around green steel, and it was terrific to be in Newcastle just last week and looking at the latest technology for green steel that's available. But we're going to talk today about green hydrogen and prefabricated buildings. So the opportunities are growing. They're happening here in Australia and in partnership and collaboration with India, which will only grow. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank Irfan for all his efforts over the last few weeks to bring all this together. It's certainly been a highlight, so congratulations to you. But now I'd like to introduce our next speaker for a keynote, and it was great to talk to the team from Adani, who are doing wonderful things here in Australia, and it's great to have Samir Vora is the Executive Director for Adani Australia, and Samir, it's great to see. Yeah, right, Irfan? Yeah. Okay. So Samir, like you can see there, has over 20 years of diversified experience in international trading and the resources sector, of course. We see what's going on in Queensland and the growth of Adani here in Australia, which we're very, very pleased to support. His main responsibility is to oversee the development of the Carmichael mine and the rail project, and many others here. He's been with Adani since 1994. So can I welcome Samir to come and give your presentation? And thanks for joining us.
Right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Irfan. It's been great to be here. I think it's been a great event yesterday, great turnout. So wonderful opportunity to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll talk a little bit about Adani's operation first in Australia, and then I'll talk about the group and what are we doing as far as our global footprint in terms of shaping the future of renewable energy. So let me first start by introducing our business in Australia. We operate 5 distinct brands in Australia. The business brands are Bravus Mining and Resources, Bowen Rail Company, Abbott Point Operations, North Queensland Export Terminal, and Adani Renewables Australia. And just to give you a little bit an idea, I'll just play one video. It's a 1-minute video. It will give you some idea of what we do in Australia. So basically, these are the 5 businesses, all predominantly in the northern part of Queensland. We employ more than 1,500 people in Australia, about 1,000 people on the mine project, about 400 people in the rail project, a port project, and about 150 people in the rail project. That's something we are really proud of. To get here, we have invested close to about $7 billion. It's been a long journey. I'm sure everyone is aware of it. It's been a tough road, 12 years. It's more than any other Indian company that has invested. Look, it's never been an easy so far. I've personally been involved for last 12 years. So I was the first person to come to Australia and start this business. And we're very proud to demonstrate an enduring commitment to this nation. And through this commitment, we are proud to be the forefront of growing international bilateral trade between Australia and India. As we know, both the nations shared wealth of shared values and interest, and we naturally complement each other. Uh, just to talk about the theme now, in terms of today's theme is about sustainability of shaping the future of renewable energy. And a lot of people ask that what how a thermal coal mine in Queensland is helping achieve that. Ladies and gentlemen, reason is very simple. There is no silver bullet. There is no currently a solution for a base load power. Currently, the world needs the transition, and transition of the energy needs both reliable, affordable power and as well as the renewable energy to meet the rising demand in our region. We have really invested in renewables. So, just to show you what we do
We
in the
have a
renewables.
vision to build a better tomorrow. A tomorrow that is vibrant and ambitious, empowered and innovative. By harnessing the incredible potential of the sun and the wind to help create a tomorrow that runs entirely on green energy. A tomorrow that generates goodness from these powerful forces for the planet and its people. We are at the heart of generating goodness.
Just to show you the footprint of what we do in terms of renewable energy, we have currently 20,000 megawatt or 20 gigawatts under operations, construction, or planned. So, and it can be seen in the map that we have a mix of solar and wind energy. In fact, we have one project in Rajasthan, which is in the western part of India, which is a hybrid of hybrid of solar and wind. It's about 390 megawatts. The fact is that managing climate change is going to be a balancing act between governments of the developed and the developing nation. And it is not fair that people in developing nations are denied an opportunity to better their lives. Unlike their grandparents, people in developing nations will not be satisfied with dirt floors, burning animal dung. They will want the sort of comfortable modern lifestyle that many of us take for granted, with fridges, consumer goods, air conditions, televisions, etc. They will need reliable and affordable base load energy alongside renewable to achieve the standard of living. And that is the opportunity we see for Australia for decades to come. When it comes to demand, it is staggering, and to see how significant it is. As you can see, that India uses 1/10 of the energy that we use in Australia. Per capita energy consumption is 972, whereas Australia is 9,857. So even if India wants to reach up to China, we need to add the energy, which is 5 times. China is about 5,297, and I do not have a graph for the world average, but world is at least 3,500 or 4 times. So even India, if it wants to come close to the world average, it needs to multiply by 3 or 4 times. So how do we solve that? The challenge is, as I said, that we need to responsibly produce all forms of energy. That includes renewable energy, that includes thermal energy, and we need to invest heavily in the alternate sources of energy. And to make India self-reliant, what we call in India is Atmanirbhar. From Adani's standpoint, we have started heavily into the manufacturing of all the renewable value chain. So as a high commissioner was mentioning yesterday, that there is a over dependency on all the renewable components from other nation. So if I give you some facts, if we have to make solar panels, India currently only manufactures solar cells and then solar panels. If you talk about the whole value chain, which starts from Mg silicon, polysilicon, solar ingots, solar wafers, solar cells, and solar modules, India has a capability of only manufacturing up to solar cells. If we do not solve the manufacturing up to the value chain, then make India self-reliant, it cannot sustain on a long term. As part of the Adani strategy, we are getting into the manufacturing. So we currently manufacture about 1.5 gigawatt, 1,500 megawatt of solar cells and solar modules, and we are now multiplying it by 4 times. So in next few years, we will be about 8,000 megawatts of manufacturing capability of all the way from polysilicon to solar ingots, cells, modules. Now, if you have seen the solar modules on the rooftop, the module itself is not about the solar cells. It requires the aluminum frame, it requires solar glass, EVAs, backsheets, and junction box. None of the components are being manufactured in India. So we are currently manufacturing all the ancillaries. It's called ancillaries for the renewable. We are manufacturing. So it's like uh, consider it like an automobile. You have OEM like a Honda or Nissan or a Ford, and then you have ancillaries around it. So hub and spoke. That's exactly what we do. And from a strategy point of view, unless we solve and manufacturing each and every component to support the renewable energy, and be dependent on other nations to provide the critical raw materials, it will never be affordable. So not only in solar, we are now manufacturing the wind turbines. We are manufacturing trackers, solar trackers. We are manufacturing inverters. We have set up a new company called Adani New Industries Limited, and we are doing all this manufacturing under that company. And last but not least, uh, we need to walk the talk. If we believe that we currently our 70% or 75% of the future investment is in solar energy or the renewable energy. We've recently signed up with Total Energies. It's a joint venture. They own 25% of our new industries. And we are getting into the manufacturing of electrolyzers and producing hydrogen. So we have all the plans between these two companies to invest US 50 billion in the next 10 years. The first projects under these banners are 1.3 million tons of urea from green hydrogen and 2 gigawatts of renewable fed electrolyzers at a cost of 5 billion. These are the two first projects. Both are in train and will be completed by 2030. Again, to make hydrogen competitive, we need to make sure that we are again manufacturing the key component, electrolyzers. So the biggest two cost components for hydrogen are electrolyzers, and if electrolyzer is powered by green energy, then green energy has to be cheap. Both. There's no point of having electrolyzers working or connected through a power grid. So to ensure that it becomes economical, we need to solve all the value chain. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just the beginning of our work in this space, but I just wanted to impress upon you that the scale of our commitment to the sustainable energy mix of the future that will derive India's energy self-reliance. I can leave you with one message to take away from what I have said today, that it will take a combination. It will definitely take a combination of thermal, renewable, and alternative energy to meet the energy needs of our children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. There is no silver bullet. Uh, if I can leave you with a second message, it would be that Adani Group, through its operations in Australia and around the globe, is doing all it can to provide the reliable, affordable, and accessible mix of energy that will create a brighter future for humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. That was terrific, and certainly great to hear your success. I guess it would be fair to say that it's been an overnight success, 12 years in the making. But certainly we welcome your investment to new technologies also, in addition to Adani and setting up future industries. I think this is to be congratulated. We need much more of that. In Australia, we have 47,000 manufacturing companies, which represents 10% of Australia's workforce. So it's a significant part of Australia's economy and worthy of our recognition and worthy of our support. And as far as technologies, I often like to share the story that my teachers, Samir, when I was young in school and just starting to use a calculator, my teacher would say, Michael, you will not have a calculator everywhere you go. You must learn mathematics much better because you will not have a calculator with you by your side. Well, we showed them. So definitely worth investing in your future technologies. So congratulations. It is my honour to introduce our next speaker. And it's been great to talk with Deepak and introduce some of our great manufacturers over the last 24 hours, and certainly welcome you here to Australia. Deepak Bagla is the CEO of Invest India. His professional career over 3 decades with the World Bank, with Citibank, private equity, having responsibilities across Europe, Africa, and Asia. He is currently the Managing Director and the CEO of Invest India, which is the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency of the Government of India. Invest India is also the execution agency for Startup India, and isn't that growing? And working, of course, working very closely with the Prime Minister and the Science and Technology Initiative. Please welcome Deepak.
Morning, everyone. Morning. Hi. Gosh, mornings are tough, especially for me. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. But you know, I must tell you, my previous life before this was private equity, and my first investment was Samir's company, Adani Power. That investment is still not out, so I don't know if I can still fund my children going to college. No, but it's truly my best investment, and I must say. But that was a previous life, so let me go. And Judy, you were terrific yesterday. And we were really looking forward to the sari again. But
I'll treat you when I go.
what I thought is, you're all the specialists in the energy industry. What is happening in India today is probably the biggest energy transition in the world. And I wanted to just share with you what is happening in India and why is that getting driven. And I'll just share a few numbers to begin with, but I wanted to give you the reason why that momentum is taking place. Today, about 1 out of every $20 spent in the world on clean energy is currently being done in India. By 2040, that will be 1 in every $7 in the world. That's the spend. That's just to let you know what the wallet sizing today is. And quite frankly, I see that wallet size expand very rapidly because these are just the initial estimates. The second one I want to start with, 70% of India of 2030 and 2035 is yet to be constructed. Now just step back and think of these two numbers. And now let me walk through with you of some of the other elements which are happening in India. Every minute, Irfan, how many people do you think we are in this room? About 100? 60? 60. Every minute, 30 people are moving from a village to a city in India. Every minute. That means in 2 minutes, we would have had this entire room relocate itself from a village to a city in India. Don't forget, 11% of the world's population lives in 640,000 of my villages currently. Now, what does that mean? It typically means that by the 2030, 2035, I would be creating a completely new European Union. I would have had 300 plus million people move from a village to a city. Think of that relocation. It means everything. Getting them a new house, getting them new energy, getting them new jobs, getting new ways of livelihood. Every aspect of your existence has to be recreated. So let me tie it back to the point where 70% of India of 2030 is yet to be constructed. And as a part of this is, for example, we are creating over 100 new smart cities, where every element of that is smartness in some form or the other. You put all these things in together and now look at the trajectory of growth where this juggernaut is moving to. I'm $3 trillion today. I'm about number 5 or number 6 on a global GDP. I'm growing at about 7%, 7.5%. If I continue on this trajectory, I'm looking at about 10 trillion by 2030. That means I add $7 trillion to the bottom lines of everybody who joins me in this journey. But more importantly, when we are talking of energy, it's obviously much longer. And as I mentioned yesterday, I'll have my 100th birthday on 15th August 2047. That's about 9,000 days away from today. And in those 9,000 days, if I go at the same trajectory, the lowest which I will be about 30 trillion, and the most optimist will be about at 100 trillion. And all what I've done is, I've got 28 states and 8 special territories. If I just look at the past 5-year track record, if I pick up what was the highest growth they've achieved in those 5 years, and I just extrapolate it, it takes me about a little to 109 trillion. If I look at the average of the growth, it takes me to 50 trillion. If I look at the lowest end of it, Jody, it takes me to about 30 trillion. So let's assume 30 trillion for the moment. I'm going to be adding $27 trillion. Now, frankly, this is now going to go into growth, which is what is critical for all of us. Today, about 16 to 17% of my GDP is coming from manufacturing. The stated objective is to take that to about 25%. So obviously, that number is going to grow. So when I talk to you about the world's largest energy transition currently taking place, and which is what is going to happen in India, is true. Let me just put it in a little shorter perspective. The only country which kept up its COP20 resolution of the G20 was India, that we said we'll bring it down under 2 degrees. So by 2030, what are we looking to do? We've said that 50% of our installed capacity will be renewables. We'll reduce our emissions by 45%, which is about 1 billion cubic pounds of CO2, if I may say so. And I think we are on the path to making that happen. And a large number of other things which have taken place is, for example, creating a special production-linked incentive plan, which is where we are trying to encourage, as you said, right through the entire chain of the supply chain, which is happening. And that is now one of the biggest things which is happening in India, by the way. Of my top 3 sectors, and by the way, let me just go back. This year, I closed my FDI with the highest ever FDI we've got in our history. And mind you, at a time when the entire world was in a lockdown. I got an FDI of $83.5 billion. From number 10 in the world, I moved to number 5 in the top 5 of FDI recipients. Most interestingly, from 101 countries, even in the lockdown. And more interestingly in that, in 61 sectors. No other country in the world can match that number. None. That is the opportunity space, and that is the trust which the world is bringing in. Why am I mentioning this to you? Of my top 3 sectors of that 61 is clean energy. And I'm just talking of the foreign investment coming in, and I'm not yet started on the domestic side of it. But let me take you back to another point. To my reason, the momentum of whenever there is a transition and a change has to be driven by people, especially so in a democracy. And please don't forget, I'm the largest free land in the world, so as to speak. And you understand democracy well because we both work on the same momentum points. We were just discussing before we started that I think our generation, mine, and then you guys are obviously a generation after me, probably did not spend as much of our time and effort on clean energy, etc. And I was just giving them an example. 3 years ago, when I had both my boys with me at home, you know, we have Diwali, the festival, and there is this pot, which the anar, what we call it. What would you call that here? To explain, a sparkler, fountain sparkler. That's pretty high on the, I'm told, on the pollution side. These are small little fellows. And I really used to love them. And I remember coming back from office, I picked up a box of 12 and my children said, we are not going to be doing it. And it was quite a disappointment. I must say this generation now coming in is the one which is far more sensitive to these points. You spoke about children, grandchildren. I see that activation happening now. And I'll tell you where that comes. I'm 1.4 billion human resource today. 1 billion of those are under the age of 35. My average age, 29. I'll be the youngest on the planet all the way up to 2080. This is the generation which is bringing that change. And let me tell you how it has now become the center point of political agenda. As a democracy, I have about 950 million registered voters in India. Of that, about 650 million actually cast their franchise. In the last election, Jody, I had 110 million first-time voters. Now you can see the importance of this first-time voter on creating a national agenda. You can see the swing factor. This is what is driving this momentum of change. And this is what is going to keep this momentum going on and not a short-term phenomenon. And let me tell you now on the domestic side where this is happening. Michael, you mentioned about the masks. You mentioned about the ventilators. It was brutal. I remember 20th March 2020 and 23rd March was the one when we went into a lockdown. When we went into a lockdown, we did not have a single mask. We did not have ventilators. The entire world was in the lockdown. We were trying to buy. I remember we created a special team. My colleague Sai Sudha was there. And we were trying to see where we can get all these elements from the world. And remind you, the entire world was locked. I could not have aircrafts. We were placing orders in certain countries which were being changed by the hour. I had an aircraft which had landed to pick up these PPEs and masks. We had transferred the money, it got an hour delayed, that was given off to some other country. And I'll tell you what happened at that point of time. I had my startups taking on. Today I have 75,000 startups. Each of those startups and my team was working day and night. You know, when you make a mask, there's a thin layer inside which comes from overseas. We weren't making it in India. I didn't know. So we had hosiery makers, we were reinventing their business lines to create this, small or big. We had young startups who had a way on how to create a ventilator, which was a little different from what you require in a COVID situation rather than in a hospital situation. And then we were matching them off with an automobile company to see how we can get them together to make it happen. And please remember, all in a lockdown, when you did not could have a single truck move from one city to other. And yet, by 30th July 2020, that is 96 days away from when we started. We had more PPEs for ourselves than we needed. We were actually exporting masks to Europe. And by the end of the year, we had even few ventilators which we could take out. Why I bring you this example of my startups? Because of the 105 unicorns I have today, and by the way, 2020 in the lockdown, I added a unicorn every 26 days. Last year, again in the lockdown, I added a unicorn every 9 days. And the reason why I tell you that is because a large number of these unicorns are based on clean energy. And a large number of my 75,000 startups, if I look at it, the single largest segment, would be on clean tech and green energy. And what you'll be happy to notice, Judy, about 40% of them have women directors or women heads. So by the way, on gender equality, women-led startups in India are increasing by 100%. Actually, even in my own office now, we are trying to get reservations for men because the women have taken over completely. But this is what I wanted to bring to you, that this entire transition, this entire change, this entire momentum, which is being created, is being driven bottom up. But more importantly, it is a reflection also of a lifestyle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. That typically has been issues where you have to teach the more developed countries and to keep telling them about it. For us, we didn't have a choice. Frankly, we still do not. But what is helping us is that now we've got these learnings, and that is when we are now starting our next revolution. So this is probably what we are on the threshold of the world's first green industrial revolution. You remember the GDP numbers which I shared with you, and you remember the additions which we are looking at. So when we talk of the new incentive schemes we've created new industrial parks which are dedicated to clean tech and clean startups and clean innovation. When I tell you about how we are now one of the largest centers, by the way, the largest number of R&D centers in the world today are in India. We are the world's #1 R&D destination for any corporates in the world having their R&D centers outside of their head office. My team has opened over 1,600 in the past 60 months, and I'm talking of global corporates. So when I talk about all these things and I tell you about this moment, and in 10 minutes, I didn't want to go through the numbers of what is happening and the innovations, what is happening. But every aspect of my life is now being turned green and sustainable. Let me put a question to you. And mobility is one of the biggest sources and challenges for sustainability. Let's take the year 2019, just before the lockdown. Do you want to take a guess how many people traveled on my trains with a legitimate ticket? I'm not talking the ones which sit on top. Take a guess. That's 30 million? I'll be looking forward to welcoming you to India soon, but on that context, why don't you take a guess on that one? 60 million? 120 million people traveled on my railways? I'm talking not on a daily basis, I'm talking annual. Okay, let me give you a number. Okay, let's. 8 billion people traveled on my railways in 2019 itself. Yes, that is, because you bought the ticket twice. We moved the entire planet in many ways. So when you think of sustainability, and when we are thinking of that housings which we have to create, I need to create about 40 million new houses in the next 10 years. And my urban centers. So when we are talking of that, we are looking at every element of sustainability in every aspect of our existence. And it's not just sustainability, it's frugal sustainability. Because at a per capita income of $1,900 an annum, of a human resource of 1.4 billion, which will be 1.6, the highest human resource on the planet by 2026, think of what I have to do at what price points and how much I have to do. So we're really looking forward to all of you being our partners in that one. Thank you.
Aren't they just extraordinary numbers? And thank you, Deepak. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And it's always good to have friends, and it's great to see our friendship growing just in these last couple of days too. So thank you. You mentioned about energy and new manufacturing. I've brought some terrific manufacturers for you to meet here this morning. And so it's my privilege to introduce Henry Sun from Lavo. Will give us a brief presentation on the Lavo green hydrogen technologies. And then we'll have other speakers talking about prefabricated building construction. And you mentioned all the homes that you're going to be needing to build, many millions of homes, tens of millions. Australia has the technology that is being developed here today. And we look forward to partnering with you as we grow. Henry Sun is the chairman of Lavo Hydrogen Technologies. He's also the CEO of the Providence Asset Group. Henry has over 25 years of knowledge in strategic planning, stakeholder management, and debt and equity advisory. He has much experience. I have some great conversations with Henry. As chair of the AIIBC, which is at UNSW around hydrogen energy research, Henry facilitates the advisory board meetings and looking for new strategies and technologies, and in my world, commercialization to get this technology out to the world. Can you please welcome Henry Sun? Thank you, Henry. We'll pull up your slide.
Here. Sorry.
There it is.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, thank you for having me today. And I'll just share the journey, why we start Lavo and what Lavo doing and what we want to achieve, what aim to achieve. Lavo hydrogen technology is originated from the innovation created by University of New South Wales. Everyone knows probably New South Wales, and the world first ranking universities in renewable energy. So at early journey prior to establishing a Lavo, and the parent company of Lavo is we call Providence Climate Capital. We established Hydrogen Energy Research Center with university to commercialize their innovation. Probably to everyone who doesn't know our technology, it's a metal alloy based hydride to store hydrogen in a very safe way, in a very scalable way, in a low pressure, 35 bar, and room temperature, which means that you easily to store, charge, discharge, and transport hydrogen in a very economic way, and also very safe way, and which can serve the industry pinpoint to get hydrogen to application commercialized in a large scale. So probably for the audience here, I know distinguished guests all from India. One of the core inventors actually is an Indian PhD. He graduated from University of New South Wales, Pooja Moody. And recently we attract his sister, Pooja Moody, joined us as well. So under Providence Climate Capital umbrella, we invest, as Deepak just mentioned, we put our focus on clean tech and renewable. In parallel with Lavo, we also invest in the green marketing agency we call Studio Air, and also we invest in REMI, the platform for circular economy. So look at the resources. Of course, Australian Adani representative just present in Australian, we have a abundant, the resources from sun, from wind, which means that, when we call it abundant, it might be treated, with respect, use that in a smart way, a sustainable way. So how to make that sustainable? We start with traceability. For the REMI, we collaborate with Everledger, is blockchain-based hard tech company based in UK and invested by UK government future funds to build a platform to trace, for example, for the application such as the PV panel from manufacturing stage to measure and the data of carbon emission and until the end of life. So, and also trace, the green hydrogen, why we call it green hydrogen, how much, carbon emission generated through the producing hydrogen. And now, as I said, we achieve a phase 1 mission. We get our hydrogen commercial prototype, manufactured in Australia in a small scale, in a pilot production line. With support from Michael and AIIBC, we got our manufacturing base in Newcastle with our lovely and supportive partners here, Wally Industrial Group and AMI Control. Now it's not enough. Well, our clients globally located. We need to go to our client, especially the client representing by India, by Europe, by Northeast Asian, by the United States. We want to get our product roll out in a large scale, close to our client, close to the market. So next step, we are facing a challenge. How we find our partners to get technology to be commercialized globally to support the green economy in the next decades ahead of us. So I just gave a quick snapshot here. And who is Lowell? I just mentioned our key partner we already identified. And next step, we want to listen and looking the opportunity beyond the horizon, which is represented by the emerging market. Yeah, that's pretty much about Lowell and myself. Thank you. Yeah.
And I will invite Henry back shortly, and we'll have a panel discussion here with some of the speakers. But great to welcome the Honourable Jodie McKay here. You know so much about Newcastle, and Lava are doing some great things with Varley and AMP Control. And for those who don't know, Newcastle is the largest port for coal in the world. And so here we are doing green hydrogen right in Newcastle in the heart of all this. So it's a great opportunity, and it's a real case study of advanced manufacturing. So thank you, Henry. Our second speaker is Murray Ellen from PT Blink, and we'll have a slide for Murray, who's the founder. Certainly is a leading expert. I have some great conversations with Murray around prefabricated building construction, and I know that Murray was responsible for the steel prefabrication at the Sydney Olympic Park, a lot of work going into that site in particular, but he has a great heritage in building construction all around the world, and also a governor of the Sydney University's Warren Institute. So he'll talk to us now briefly about what PT Blink are doing, and it's an exciting time. So please welcome Murray.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's an absolute honour to be here and privileged to be amongst such an incredible group of people. How long did I have? This just, look, from this conversation, that's just not fair. Honestly, it's just, give me 4. How do I get the slide up, Michael? Do I just do this? Okay, so we're going to change the world. Okay. I think we have 5 minutes. I think that energy is an incredible commodity, and we shouldn't waste it. So let's not use as much. Blink is founded on the premise that we can manufacture our built infrastructure, not build it. With 30%, if not 40% less energy input than is required anywhere else in the world. So when we've got to have 4 times the energy, let's not do that. Let's look at how we can use and achieve way more with less. I founded Blink. My name is Murray Ellen. I have traveled the world. I've worked in 14 different countries, in different places. That includes China, Japan, Dubai, Tijuana, Mexico, the Philippines, the US of A. We've got a large American partner with us at the moment. I was in Stanford last week, actually, and they've got the same problem where what I see here and I see there and I see around the place is what I call like-mindedness. And through like-mindedness, we can achieve anything. But it comes from like-minded people. It doesn't come, I don't think, from, it assists, but with governments or people, it comes from people in this room, right? And there are rooms like this, I think, everywhere I go. As I said, I was in Stanford. It's not a show off. They put up with me. But men my age, the generation, okay? We have to unlearn stuff. And it's nuts. Unlearning, I think, is the biggest problem we're facing. Can we throw out the idea that we're going to take reinforcement to a site and build it? Can we throw out what we've been doing for 20 or 30 years, the design and construct process? Let's design it, manufacture it, and integrate it. And I'm at Stanford and I said, well, what's your biggest problem? And I'm with SciFi, which is on the side of Stanford. It's a industry-related thing like the Academy of Technology and Science here, like the Warren Centre that I happen to sit on at Sydney University. And say, look, in 5 short years, if we set up on your campus a fitness centre, a centre where the 200 manufacturers on our horizontal platform, all local to the US, can meet and bring in the problems, and these young minds don't have to unlearn, in 5 short years, we can change the world. And we can do that together in any part of the world. So what do? We design it. What does that mean? It's like a car. We heard that analogy earlier. It's a chassis of a car. Our first chassis, I was going to put a video, well, it wasn't brave enough to make sure it worked. We put our first chassis up 4.5 years ago. That's the backbone, conforming to existing architecture. We can stretch and pull it with software. From where? That software comes from the skills our kids have. It's a game engine. It's just a game. And we can manufacture directly from a game. Women in construction, women and people who can use skills that I don't have. I'm no good at that. But we can make architecture, any architecture, conform by stretching and pulling. So we have a chassis. Our first chassis, which is that picture on the left far side, 4 years ago, a 7-story building went up in 11 days. So, can't remember, was it 70% of the population's got to be moved? Was it how much power we've got to use? I just reckon we should manufacture it. That's what I came here to say. And I think it's about like-minded people wherever we are in the world. Is my 3 minutes up? Because I could go all day.
We'll get you back on the panel.
I'm going to finish with an apology. That's all right. Can I finish with an apology?
Please.
I don't think Samir's here anymore. Is any Adani people still here? Well, could you take my apology? Could you apologise to Samir for me? Because Deepak's about to make the best investment he's ever made. And he's going to tell the story that was the second best investment. Thank you very much.
And again, isn't this a great example of bringing people together and opening up these opportunities? It's terrific to work with Viswanathan with the Make with India chapter here at the Australia-India Business Council. I was in Adelaide last month speaking with Deepa Matthew and bringing people together in South Australia to look for opportunities. So it's just good to be able to do these, bring these people together. Our third and final speaker is Jeff Wyatt from a company called Oswald. And Jeff is the director and founder of the company. At AIIBC, at the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, we co-funded one of our early projects was with Oswald about building this prefabricated building technology that Jeff's going to share with us now. So please make him welcome.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with everybody today. Listening to your talk, Deepak, I'm thinking, yeah, our technology might actually have some relevance in India if you need to build all these buildings very, very quickly. So essentially, what is Oswald? We're a prefabricated formwork system which we use to create concrete elements. So when you need to build a building, you need concrete walls and you need concrete columns. It's not the only way to build, and We've actually been having ongoing discussions with Murray, and there's elements that we create that fit into his model of prefabrication. And so concrete's one way to build, steel's another way to build, and often combining the two together is a very good way to build. The main thing is that construction on site is incredibly inefficient. Everybody's trying to build together. They're all jumping all over each other. They're only concerned about their part of the building process. And so what we do in our technology is we move those elements off-site into a manufacturing environment. Manufacturing environments are really good because it doesn't matter if it's hot, doesn't matter if it's raining, your manufacturing plant continues. The best way to conceptualize our technology is to think of precast concrete. Everybody's largely familiar with precast concrete. You make the entire element in a factory, you bring it to the job site, you drop it in, and you carry on. We're like precast, except that we add the concrete on site. So that has a lot of advantages. An element out of Oswald weighs 1/7 of a precast element. Transport's cheaper, cranes are cheaper, construction's simpler, etc., etc. What we actually do is, if you can imagine that panel that you can see there, we bring the reinforcement when we turn into a cage. Think of it as an internal skeleton. We add the formwork to both sides of that element. We deliver the element to site, drop it in, it's very quick, fill it with concrete, remove the form ply, take it back to the factory, make another one. We actually have two systems. One's a permanent formwork system. We get a lot of projects where, like this, we're building up against a sandstone wall in CBD, Sydney. There's no room to build with conventional construction. We might be 20 millimetres off a boundary. We have a project that we're doing just down the road at the Rocks, where between the back of our wall and the adjacent building is about 15 millimetres. Can't do that with conventional technology. We reduce site labour by 90%. Because we're moving that activity into a factory environment. The advantages of the system is we have increased speed of construction. Typically, you would expect using a prefabricated element that you might reduce the construction time by about 20%. The other advantage is, of course, construction can progress during adverse conditions. So I'm imagining, I think in India, you have a monsoon that lasts for perhaps 3 months. And during that 3 months, I'm sure there's not a lot of activity on site. All of those resources that can't work could be sitting in a factory environment, building elements in advance. So when the monsoon breaks, you built 50% of the building and you just pick the elements up and you drop them in. Because it's in a factory, we have a higher quality. This is a very low capital cost. Oswald's an unusual technology in that you don't need a big machine or a whole lot of capital, or you just need our technology. And it largely can be done with unskilled labour. One of the things that we have designed but not produced is both of these systems can be replaced with recycled plastic, the circular economy. One of the problems with form ply in Australia, 80% of it's imported from China. Once it's used, it goes into landfill because you can't recycle form ply. You can recycle timber, but you can't recycle form ply. So with plastic, at the end of the life of the form ply made out of plastic, you grind it up, you make another panel, and you use it again. So I think that's one of the things we haven't done, but we have designed it, that would be very exciting for India, and that is to create both these systems out of recycled plastic. We are looking for licensees to take up the Oswald technology in India. I ran a factory in Dubai for 3.5 years with an earlier technology. I've been to India 6 or 7 times, but probably not within the last 15 years. So I know a little bit about India. So yes, we are looking for partners to work with in India. Thank you.
Very good. Please take a seat here, Jeff, and we'll invite the other speakers up. Henry, would you join us? And come on down, Murray, and we'll have a brief talk. And Certainly, you're hearing about the technology, that patented technology with Oswald. Certainly, an opportunity for the sort of numbers that you're talking, Deepak, at home. But Henry, I wanted to start with you because one of your major competitors, I guess, would be fair to say, is the Tesla Powerwall. And so with Larvo, what you're building with your hydrogen storage connected to solar panels on the home, you've got some big competition.
Yes or no? Yeah, here, now we don't want to make a public enemy here. We're seeing in Tesla, the lithium battery is complementary to long duration storage, which Lava represent on the market. We can solve the real pinpoint for industry, not as an interim, short-term solution here.
Mm-hmm. And Murray, certainly the research partners becomes important. You mentioned about Sydney University, but bringing these great research minds together to then commercialise, which is what you're doing with your United States partners now, must open up. When you hear Deepak talk about the opportunities in India, your mind must be racing.
Yeah, no, it's racing. Look, I think it's about bringing real life, real manufacturers. We've got here in Sydney, about 200 manufacturers on the list, which is it's their technology. It's like Jeff, right? We're a platform, digital platform that can bring owners and developers of property directly in touch with manufacturers. And I think that the continued innovation of that and the continuation of insight that comes both from industry and from young minds is really, really, really important. So our vision is to have at University of Western Sydney, what I'm calling a fitness centre, where all these parts come together, both digitally and physically. One in India, one in the US, one in the UK, and then that cross-fertilisation of different innovations and different technologies can be explored with younger minds to be explored and put into practice. It really becomes, if you like, a marketplace.
But then for Jeff, it does become a growing manufacturing story, because as Murray's saying about just the 200 manufacturers here in Australia, think about globally exporting the Oswald technology, and you certainly tapped it right on the head about the waste minimisation. There's a great opportunity there globally to really grow the manufacturing story, right?
Yes. It's just simply the fact that you're moving an activity into a factory environment, and factories are just a lot more efficient. And we're working with Murray, and some of our elements fit into Murray's model, and parts of the building will be in steel and parts will be in concrete. But essentially, the important thing is they're prefabricated. Mm-hmm. They're not assembled on site. Site is just a wrong place to do stuff. It needs to be created off-site as an element, and then just ching, ching, ching. It's just like a mechano set.
Saving time and waste reduction
and money. Yeah,
this is good. And Larvo is in talks and doing things with Springfield City, which Jim would appreciate. Springfield City Centre in Queensland. So the Larvo technology is already expanding and growing the workforce, but it's a global story, because everyone is looking now. The number one thing in the world right now is manufacturing. COVID changed the whole language. Suddenly the whole world is talking about what can we make and how can we get it to market. But the second one is hydrogen and energy. So you've got a growing opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. We feel welcome and support. We're fortunately supported by local community, including a local Indian community here. We're proudly to say that, in Springfield, with support of Chairman Maha, we put the first fuel cell production plant in Australia. So that we're going to partner with our Netherlands partner, is a fuel cell company, to build our first production line for Australian localized produced fuel cell. That's why for Lao and startup to survive and in Australia, we need the entire supply chain to be localized here. That including electrolyzer, fuel cell, and also all different hydrogen storage solution to build up an ecosystem here. So it's very important. And also bear in mind here, Australian, we have a very limited population, which is stand for a small market size or domestic market demand. We're willing, and also our vision always go beyond Australia and go to other markets to put our technology innovating in Australia and benefit and commercialize locally and benefit broader community outside Australia.
It's a privilege of mine to walk the factory floors all over Australia with 47,000 manufacturing companies. As I said, 10% of the workforce. It is significant. But today's special to be able to bring some of our leading manufacturers together and share their experience with the project that we've been able to help fund and help make collaboration possible. So can you please thank our panelists, and can I encourage you all to come up and speak with them when we have the break, because I'm sure they're very excited to talk with you and share their experience. So thank you very much. And now it's my privilege to introduce our next speaker, who is Scientist Professor Veena Sahajwalla from the University of New South Wales. And Veena's going to share some of her latest work and then introduce some of her speakers that she's going to share with us today. So please make Veena welcome, who is also our current New South Wales Australian of the Year. Thank you, Veena.
Thank you, Michael, for that very warm welcome. And I want to convey my thanks to the organising committee and Irfan. Thank you for the fabulous work everyone's done. Wow, what a few days we've been having. Very inspiring. And I do want to sort of really just begin by acknowledging that the work that we've been doing, of course, supported through the Australian Research Council, the ARC funds a lot of research, but I guess without our industry partners, it actually wouldn't be coming to life. But I think it goes to the heart of fundamental science, technology, innovation, but then how do you actually bring it to life? So I thought I might just pull two very clear examples, and my industry partners who are in the room who will join us on the panel in a moment, but really just to give you an example of our story on green steel. And Michael Parker, who's the MD for Molycop, will tell you, of course, a few things about the technology. But I guess, I mean, thinking about what the ARC enabled us to do and how a lot of these solutions came to life was really, in a way, one of those, collaborations. You talk about collaboration between industry, between, I guess, research. But I suppose it's always about creating an ecosystem where we've talked about circular economy. We have to recognize that not all materials will be converted back into the same product over and over again, and nor should we expect that to happen. What that then means is if all the materials that we need in our ecosystem, whether they are metals or ceramics, or indeed the polymeric materials we've talked about, imagine if all of these materials could interconnect and they could actually find a whole new way in which we're defining lateral integration. You've heard about terminologies of vertical integration. Well, let me put to you that lateral integration is going to be important if we need security of material supplies. And Deepak, if 70% is yet to be built in India, then I guess we start to think about, where are those materials going to come from? Whether you're building physical or electronic infrastructure, we do need metals, we do need ceramics. And so part of this journey that I'll take you through will really be able to shine a little bit more light on that. But if I come back to these examples that I was talking about, on one hand, green steel, and that's in Newcastle. And then we've got another small town called Kuramandra. So there's Andrew, our other industry partner, sitting there. And I guess you might say, well, where are these two companies sort of coming together in what kind of supply chain? I suppose suffices to say that in the early days, it was a bit like, Andrew here's Molycop and Molycop here's Andrew. And I guess, as they say, rest is history. We've now got a supply chain where, as you probably know, a lot of good steel present in tires that can become part of that ability to supply steel. And one might say, well, okay, well, isn't that, you need iron ore to make steel? Of course you do, right? And we'll come to that story in a moment as well. But the point is that you also need a whole lot of scrap metal. If you're going to, again, build, you need a lot of scrap metal to be able to manufacture. We heard Henry talk about metal alloys. So you can start to see, when we actually unpack and go deeper and deeper into all of these different technologies, you actually need different kinds of metals. But the important point is you need to be able to control chemistry and properties of these metals and ceramics so they are fit for purpose. So if you're going to develop new energy storage systems where you need to have, we've heard about electrolyzers, you need electrodes, you need a whole range of different kinds of materials, so you can actually bring that into the ecosystem. So, okay, so Andrew's now someone who's able to supply steel, right, as scrap metal. But we also have another useful resource, and in the production of green steel, what we have shown is all of that rubber that is there in our tires. And again, when you start to think about circular economy, we're not saying that all of that rubber has to be converted into a new tire. What we're really saying is when those tires are no longer roadworthy, you can actually deploy polymer injection technology, which is what our green steel technology is all about, so that we can liberate those hydrogen molecules from those rubber molecules and use that in situ in the steelmaking process. So what we're really showing is green steel is feasible because tires and many of these other materials are actually rich in hydrogen molecules. So the ability to bring green steel where in situ recycling and manufacturing of green steel can take place at various scales. So keeping in mind, again, steel production doesn't only happen in a large integrated facility. Yes, that's one way to make steel, but you've got, particularly in an Indian context, where you've got induction furnaces, right? Significant proportion of steel happens there, electric arc furnaces. Well, you know, if you have to decarbonize, well, why would you not look at these alternative resources? Except what we're really saying is, let's find different ways in which they come into the supply chain. And of course, it's back to that same point. It's not about a like for like conversion, you know, plastic becoming another plastic or tire becoming another tire, but it's about taking advantage of the kinds of materials that can come back into our ecosystem. So if we say we need to have more nickel and cobalt and all of these metals, well, again, there are enough resources in our waste that can become part of the circular economy. And that's not to say it's just about bringing in waste slags. Now, Michael will love the word because I think we're probably the only two metallurgists in the room. I don't know if there are any, but if there are, you know, now's the time to own up. But that's really what we're talking about here. Materials manufacturing, and I love the fact that this morning we've heard manufacturing so many times. Materials manufacturing can be done on various scales, and they can be done to achieve the purpose and to be fit for purpose. So when we talk about various methods in which we are talking remanufacture, we have to be mindful there are multiple pathways of input feedstock that come in. So whether it's about taking our waste batteries, waste energy storage devices, and I know we've heard this morning about photovoltaic panels, and we've talked about a whole range of systems. Well, think about the whole of systems approach. You can then bring in and manufacture and remanufacture metals like nickel, for example, and cobalt and all of these materials. So you can start to remanufacture those parts and components. And then, of course, you can put that in towards the kinds of solutions that you need in any modern exercise that we're trying to undertake here, whether it's about the ability to create physical infrastructure, electronic infrastructure, whether you need metals or ceramics, there are a whole range of materials. And of course, I'll come to in a moment, what we do at the Smart Center at UNSW is that collaboration piece. So we talk about the ability to have not only a microfactory in Cootamundra, for instance, which we'll come to as my panelists come to the podium, but we also are looking at production of green steel, green metals, and a whole range of solutions that are not just being developed from a scientific point of view, but also more importantly, looking at how we translate that science into practice. So indeed, acknowledging the support from AIIBC in supporting the future generations of what that green steel looks like. Yeah, absolutely. We want to decarbonize and we want to get to that zero coke in the production of green steel. But how do we get there? You know, no one has actually been able to crack that on an industrial commercial scale. And this is really what we're talking about. It's one thing to talk about all of these pilot solutions. It's a whole different ballgame when we're talking about showing that you can do it on a commercial scale production and yet achieve quality products that we need. So just to give you a sense of how much of these resources we already have sitting on our planet, just think about printed circuit boards. And you might say, okay, well, why does that matter? Of course it matters. It is at least 10 to 20 times richer in metals like copper compared to the ores that you can dig out of the ground. Right? So you take the best possible copper ore that may have about a couple of percentages of copper, whereas here we're talking about 10 to 20% copper on a circuit board. So the kinds of technologies that we're developing in our e-waste microfactory is so you can decentralize everywhere where you have a stockpile of these kinds of waste. You can actually bring in renewables. You can bring in our micro factories, go in there, process this through our thermal isolation techniques, and bring out a high quality copper alloy fit for purpose. We're talking about renewable energy. Well, think about how much copper is needed in one EV. 80 kilos in one electric vehicle, right? So we talk about scalability. Imagine if every place you do manufacturing of parts and components, and we've heard that this morning, well, the most important thing you then need to make sure you can fulfill those demands is the ability to access these kinds of metals in that ecosystem. And of course, here's an example. So this is a live example of a patented technology that we have. We're producing through thermal micronizing our ability to create high quality copper and tin. I don't need to tell you, you need to go back and just have a look at the prices of these kinds of metals. Decarbonization, energy storage, all of that would not be possible if we didn't have these kinds of materials. And then they have to be fit for purpose, the right quality alloy, and of course, embedding that into all kinds of devices is important. But if you can actually make these kinds of micro materials, keep in mind the next obvious step is to 3D print your components and parts. Voila. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about. But when we talk 3D printing and manufacturing and all of these solutions for these high tech and high performance systems, the most important thing you need, of course, is the feedstock and the resource. And that feedstock and that resource, what you're looking at on the screen right there, is exactly what we're generating from waste in our micro factories. The reason why I say micro factories, in case you're wondering, can it achieve scale? Absolutely. What we are showing is you can multiply that many times over, and you can put that in any location where your stockpile is there. So what you're saying is the factory is coming to you, and you're actually putting that and making that mobile, and even better when it's powered by renewables. Now, why does it matter? Why does it matter that we've got these decentralized facilities? Because imagine you can now take PV, put it on a roof of a mobile unit like that, couple PV and renewable energy and materials. You've suddenly got a holistic system of sustainable solutions where your energy is renewable and your materials are renewable. But you can only do that when you've indeed got solutions that are able to produce these high quality products. I said to you about batteries. Now, how often would you stop and think about the fact that you've got all of these disposable batteries and you go, oh gosh, how are we going to aggregate this? And even if you could aggregate it, remember, safety is important. You can't transport a lot of these batteries over long distances because there's always a safety hazard associated with it. It would be a lot better if you could again process it where it is. And what would you process? So look at just a simple battery like this. It's rich in metals. You can see on the inside that powder inside these batteries, in this particular instance, rich in manganese and zinc. So why would you not take that as your feedstock? And what we have shown is exactly that, converting a lot of these into manganese oxide, zinc oxide. So this is where now we get into those high-tech ceramic materials, because a lot of these then go into making electrodes. So again, you can build up that connectivity in terms of supplies of these materials. But the important point is what you've done is you've not wasted any material. You've not wasted any of these resources. Because when you think about decarbonization, there's already a lot of energy gone into making materials in the first place. So if you've made materials, then that waste has already got all of that embedded energy in it. What you're really doing is harvesting not just that material, but you're actually harvesting energy that went into making it. It's a whole new way of thinking about when you think sustainability, it's about saying it's about sustainable materials and energy coming together in this way. And you can see, of course, all the fantastic, highly refined materials. We've come a long way in taking our materials and converting them into these devices. But that's not to say that, oh, we've already got all the elements that we already need. What we're really saying is that if we are to now take different kinds of ores, whether they are copper-based ores or ferrous ores, non-ferrous ores that we're talking about, how do you convert that into a metallic form? And this is where, of course, what we're doing with green steel, we're taking that journey beyond steel, looking at how green metals can be produced. So one of the latest innovations that we have is actually looking at how we might use waste coffee. Yes, waste coffee, all of that residue that's left behind, and the world, tell you what, has got plenty of it. Right here in Sydney, we've got plenty of it. that can become a feedstock because, again, it's rich in carbon and hydrogen. So I'll come to very quickly some of the other materials we've been producing, and I'll invite our panelists to join me in a moment. Think about all of that high quality plastic. This high quality plastic that at the moment is considered non-recyclable, very difficult to recycle. We have actually shown that they can then be converted into plastic filaments. Why does it matter? Because you've suddenly got value creation happening right there. That waste plastics is not worth a lot, but the minute it converts into filaments, worth a lot of money. Even better, if you use that as a feedstock for 3D printing, you've now created highly functioning parts and components that you need. And imagine if all of this was powered through renewables. So now we'll just quickly move forward into, and I wanted to just show you this example of what we're doing with 3D printing is that, and indeed it's a special moment for us, because when my colleague Anirban and I traveled through India many years ago, one of the first products we made was a replica of Mahatma Gandhi's glasses. And it was really near and dear to our hearts, because we said, right, we're going to have the first product that we will always have. It's going to be a replica of Mahatma Gandhi's glasses. And actually, at the time, that was presented to Prime Minister Modi. And we really feel proud that, that's how our journey started. And you can see it right then. That's why I wanted to share that with you. And of course, since then, we've made a whole range of different kinds of products. This is a microfactory at UNSW. We've gone from a couple of microfactories at the university. Really, this is where research, prototyping, demonstration, all of that happens. But the next stage, of course, is where Andrew will tell you a bit about his microfactory that he's developing. So we can actually start to show this is all real. And then you might say, okay, well, who are your users? Who's actually using these green ceramic tiles and all these wonderful products? So here's an example of an apartment in Sydney. And you can see in this apartment, whether it's that kitchen splashback, floor tiles, island bench face, all of that has been made using our green ceramics technology, which contains waste glass and waste textiles. And Andrew can share a little bit of that journey with you. So this is what we're doing at the moment. Connectivity between all kinds of laterally integrated supply chains and products means you can have scenarios where different people in that supply chain can come together. I mean, we've had a conversation just coming in this morning with an organization that's really looking to support women's workforce and really saying, well, actually, you know what, if we're going to recycle waste textiles, can we work with you guys? Because you know what, many organizations, corporates want to actually decommission their corporate uniforms. Now imagine if that created jobs. Those jobs meant that becomes part of the supply chain. That then comes into our green ceramics microfactory. We've suddenly delivered not just environmental and economic benefits, but we're creating new jobs that did not exist before. Now that's applicable whether you're talking about Australia or India. That whole kind of vision of creating all kinds of new jobs to help our communities, whether they're in urban centers or whether they are in remote and regional communities across India and Australia, would be absolutely fantastic. So I'll just kind of pause on this slide, and while our industry partners are making their way up, I'll invite Michael, Andrew, and Anirban to please join me for our panel discussion. I want to take a moment to reflect on this whole notion and this concept of micro recycling science, where we are saying that we can synthesize every kind of micro material from waste. So the example we've given you earlier of our steel making solutions, our green steel, which of course is something that Molycorp has got a global license for. The kinds of feedstock we've talked about, there's tires. Then we're talking about the company that Andrew runs, which is Kandui Technologies, where of course we're using waste textiles, as I said earlier. And then of course the list goes on and on. You can of course start to see when we talk about things like rare materials, rare earths, well, of course they come from electronic devices, and we've got partnerships with organizations in Sydney that are looking at, of course, how we take all of that rare material and put that back into production. And so on that note, I'll pause there for a moment and really just introduce our industry partners here, starting with Michael, and invite Michael to say a few words about about himself and Molycop, and really, I guess, the journey for Molycop. Michael's the managing director of Molycop for Australasia. So over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Veena, and thanks for the invitation today. Just a little bit of history of Molycop. It's Molycop, or Commonwealth Steel, started in Newcastle in 1917, originally formed to localise the manufacture of rail wheels and other rail products with the outbreak of World War One. So probably some parallels to today as well. The company pioneered electric arc steel making in the company, started making steel there in 1919, and is Australia's oldest continuously operating steelmaker. We make a whole range of niche products. We're a relatively small steelmaker, from rail wheels to grinding media for hard rock mining. And probably about 10 years ago, we started our relationship with Veena and the Smart Centre at UNSW. And it was really around that whole, how do we start moving from relying on virgin raw materials and converting some of these waste streams, or recovering the materials from these waste streams. The electric arc furnace process by nature uses scrap steel. Over 90% of what we make steel out of is already recycled. Steel making needs carbon, and as Veena said, tyres are fundamentally made up of carbon and hydrogen, the polymer side, which we can process and use in our steel making process, and then the tyre cord from the tyres is then baled and used as a scrap source feed as well. We're just about to start polymer injection. We've installed the equipment and just about ready to go now, and even our small operation will consume something like 100,000 tyres a year once they're processed.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. I'll invite Andrew Douglas to again introduce himself and his company.
Thanks, Veena. Unfortunately, I can't boast 109 years of history for my company. It was founded in 2021, so it's relatively recently come onto the scene, and it's on the back of my journey of mattress recycling. I've been trying to come up with solutions for a problematic waste, a bulky waste that's integrated with steel that ends up at Molycop, but also timbers, textiles, and plastics. And they're layered and they're glued and they're bonded and they're very difficult to recycle. And as it would be in Wollongong, I think it was about 13 years ago, I was at a sustainability symposium, and the presenter before me was Veena talking about e-waste. And after the event, Veena pulled me aside and said, "Oh, what's this mattress recycling business that you're doing?" And I said, "Oh, look, it's a bit crackpot, but yeah, we're trying to pull the steel out of it and give that to the steel makers. But we're left with this integrated textile problem. And at the moment, I'm going to put it into punching bags and hide it there." And that was a good solution, but there's only so many punching bags and there's a lot of mattress textile waste. So Veena said, "Look, we're doing a bit of work at the university. Perhaps you could give us a few samples and we can do a bit of work on that." Glad to do that. And Veena and the guys at the uni went off and did their thing. Didn't hear a lot for a few years. And then one day I got a call from Veena and the guys. I said, "You should come down to the university and have a look what we've done with the mattress waste." I said, "Oh, okay." And I had some images in my head of, like a scene out of CSI with the blue light where you're going over and you're not wanting to touch it. And they put out a range of tiles, and they were aesthetically beautiful. And I couldn't believe that the waste and the material that had no value at all, and we were paying to get rid of it, suddenly took on a life of beauty and engineering excellence that would perform in any building across the world. So the guys kindly said, "Do you want to come on the journey of commercialization to see if we can get this product out to the world?" And that's where we've been for the last 18 months, and we've taken little steps. We've gone from a kitchen splashback to a few sports changing rooms to the swimming pool at Olympic Park. And our next big job is a fashion retailer called Zimmerman, the high end. They
I'm
I'm not a fashion guy, so I have to. So they're fitting out their next store in Florida using their materials as an input feedstock, and then that's about 260 squares, and then we're doing 8,500 squares for a bank in Sydney next year, which is significant scale up of the business. I'll throw over to Annabelle.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess, Anirban, I wanted perhaps to capture, we've talked a lot about young people, and we've talked about how, of course, you heard all these amazing stats from Deepak this morning around, the kind of workforce, one, that we need, and we have talented young people, of course. But I think to me, the important part in all of this conversation is the point that he made about recognizing that how committed young people are to the environment. And I think for me, that combination of what that actually translates into in practice, it's about their love for the environment. And if you can combine that with science, technologies, as we call STEM, engineering and maths. So I guess I'm going to embarrass the last speaker, who is in that category of a young person who, probably, compared to the rest of us in this room, yes, is probably the youngest anyway.
I think this gentleman in the front.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll let you guys figure it out later. But I guess this is to me the bit that I love the most about the work that we do at the Smart Centre is how passionate young people are, whether it's in India or in Australia. And I think to me that's really where the hope and the optimism for our planet is, that when we talk about this incredible future and how we shape a sustainable future, we need to be able to create those pathways and opportunities where it's not just about here's research and you sit here and do your research, but actually here's the world. What would you like to do? Go out there and shape the world and take charge and make it yours. And I think to me, I can't find a better example than someone like Anirban, who actually did exactly that. So I have embarrassed him adequately, but he is now head of our micro factories at UNSW, and perhaps tells all these other guys as to, what are the best ways to solve these problems. So I'm gonna, after all of that embarrassment, Anirban, get you to introduce yourself and, say a few things about all the work we're doing with Molycop and of course with Can Do It.
Oh, well, thank you. I guess, so heads up, as you probably realized, there is a source of inspiration that I think we all draw upon. And as Andrew was giving his story of 10 years back, he ran into Veena. I think a similar time, I also had the opportunity to meet Veena. And when I was finishing my degree, I think I had a call, and I think I'd spoken to you and said, well, you're finishing a robotics degree, but we have a robot. Would you like to come in and program it as your intern? It's like, what are you doing with a robot? But sure, that sounds great. And it was one of these old Baxter robots, which was all about humanoid robotics. So I was duly excited. Came there in, I think, end of 2015 and haven't left since. And from there it's just evolved. But I think for us to see how that partnership has grown, I think from the different materials to different technologies, and as you might have realized, I'm not an industry partner. I do actually work at the Smart Centre, but I think for us, it's the people we work with, be it in the centre, be it across Cootamundra or Newcastle or around the world, that we've had an opportunity to travel. And I think just with that story with the Mahatma Gandhi glasses, that was just to kind of see what the photographs I know we were getting at the desk today, Andrew, where that technology is around filaments, when it was an area that we'd kind of started at that point where we were excited about 3D printing. People were kind of talking about making we've got a few products, and yeah, we've bit of show and tell. At that time, it was in 2016. It was still pretty new, and some schools had it, some people had it at home. So I built one of these printers at home for myself, and it kind of worked, but not really. But there was why don't we start actually making the materials for it rather than even worrying about the printing part of it? Like, where are we actually going to get all these materials? Like, what goes into it? And at that point, with e-waste and with some of the challenges we were trying to solve around the plastics end of the e-waste problem, where a third of by weight of e-waste is plastic. The metals and the other materials can be resolved, but what do you do with category 7 plastics when you've got ABS and polycarbonates and all these mixed up, which are, as an engineer, they're fantastic. They're some of the most, oh yeah, Andrew, why don't you do the weightlifting part? There's now it's a kilo. When at that point we were able to, so when we first started, we were able to make about 15 centimeters or so. And I know exactly how much, because it took about an hour to make that amount of filament. Now, of course, we've got spools coming off as of this year. But we had to print 70 Mahatma Gandhi glasses initially, and that order in a matter of a week became 300. And at 70, we'd already kind of said, yes, we'll print a few. We'll take some small ones across. And they went, well, great. If you can make small ones, can you make big ones? Can you make one that the Prime Minister of Australia at the time can present to the Prime Minister of India? And we were kind of going,
yes.
like, we can't say no, but this is so 4 weeks later, making these small bits of filament and printing through it, we managed to make those glasses, which we had the privilege of flying with because they had to be hand delivered. At that time, they were quite fragile. And it to me, it's that couple of years back when Andrew then stepped into the picture and went, this is really cool. Can we put this in schools? Can we get this into, can we put this in the hands of all these schools that require filaments or universities? Can we make this accessible? And I think even and when we went to India that year and we saw some of the waste challenges, that now in Nowra and Shoalhaven and in Cootamundra, we've got these filament microfactories, but to get there, it was that first microfactory at the university that kind of took us there. So I might leave it there and in terms of the journey. But...
Thanks, Anirban. And I guess part of the, that's a great segue into the point you made about, where we're seeing waste processing happening, across Australia and India. I mean, part of our vision is very much about saying, if we can create these kinds of feedstock materials, and if we can use them, not only, of course, to make all kinds of consumer items, because of course that's a big growing market. I mean, you got aspirations where, whether you're using sort of spectacle frames or other consumer items, but then there's also the whole big story around building and construction when you start to get into building and construction products. And I might come to that in just a moment, but while we're on the topic of course, resources and materials, I want to come back to Michael on green steel, because I guess the story of green steel in a way for us and how we bring that journey into India is a great source of excitement for us, because when we talk about decarbonization, and we're actually saying that if the capacity has to increase in India from, and please correct me if my numbers are not quite right, but from current production of 100 million to taking it up to 2 and 3 million tons, if that's where we're headed towards in the demands for what steel production is going to look like in India, then of course, keeping in mind that if you now think about green steel as a way to decarbonize, this is really where, of course, for Molycop as our licensee globally for this technology. So I wanted to give the platform to Michael to maybe comment on where Michael's vision for I guess green steel is.
As you said, Veena, the whole steelmaking industry has to decarbonise, and I think maybe people are aware there's probably 3 ways you can make steel. Induction furnaces, which are relatively small part. The main route is blast furnace BOS, like here Port Kembla Steelworks, or electric arc furnaces. So there is certainly a path with electric arc furnaces to make low carbon steel. The process is obviously electrified. For us, we're already one of the biggest supporters of renewable energy in Australia. We signed a long-term PPA backed by a wind farm and solar farm. So that's a path to have an industrial process that's electrified, and ultimately when the things like industrial scale batteries come to fruition, they can be powered 100% on renewable energy. And over time, and I guess in India is already a large steel maker, but over time you will also have to make that transition, and the world's moving to probably more electric arc furnaces. Then things like UNSW's green steel technology, this polymer injection, comes to the fore, where you can start using waste streams rather than sourcing. At the moment, we source all our carbon products out of China, and they typically come from the oil or coal. So how do you convert that again to using a waste stream rather than consuming virgin raw materials and sending all this other stuff to landfill?
Thanks.
Can I pick up on that point, Mike? So in terms of the bank redevelopment that we're looking to do in Sydney next year, we're starting to receive material now. So the process is the demo material that's coming out of the bank, the glass, the ceramics, the marble, the granite that would traditionally go to landfill is coming to us, and we're going to repurpose that, mix it with the waste textiles out of the building, and that'll get reinstalled. And that's never been done before at scale. So this will be the largest reuse of recycled material from a demo going back into a building that has happened at a global scale.
I guess the classic examples of why I left the slide up there, and coming back to reflect on everything we're seeing, and we'll pick up on a few other items that we haven't yet touched on that is there in our slide. We've talked about tires and waste textiles and glass, and I mean, bearing in mind that all of these are essential materials, and we also recognize in a way that globally this is a big challenge. You think about how much waste textile does end up, of course, in landfill or gets burnt. For us, it's about recognizing that these are materials that are, of course, first and foremost, we should reuse and repair and do all the right things and reduce our consumption of these kinds of products. But you can imagine now when you've got materials that are no longer wearable, no longer roadworthy with tires and so on, what we're really talking about, back to that notion of circular economy, and what we have developed is this whole new science of micro recycling, is to really get right down at that molecular level and go, you know what, actually, if we could do, of course, the reduce, reuse, recycle, but also that fourth R of reform, because what we're doing here is reforming these materials to convert them into completely new products, which means, of course, we shouldn't be putting anything away into landfill, and waste is really just a material that's waiting to be harvested into its next life, and the list goes on and on. But I guess the most important point in all of this that we are saying is that the capacity and the ability to do this at the right scale is also important, because if you are in a remote community or in a rural community and you want to create local jobs, and you've got access to a lot of locally available materials. And we know, of course, it's not just about the things that come out of our homes in terms of the items that we've said now with textiles and glass, but there's all of this electronics infrastructure. So I'll hand over to Anirban to reflect a little bit on some of the work that we've been doing with hard drives and batteries and so on. I guess from that perspective, we've got, again, that question about where some of these rare earths are going to come from. So part of the reason why I want to bring that up as another part of this conversation, as you'll see up there, that we've got a lot of specialty devices. Now you can say they're specialty devices, but let's face it, a lot of these magnets that are there, whether they are there in our electronic systems or in many of our medical instruments, these are all things that matter to us when we talk about quality of life, right? When we talk about access to education and healthcare and all of those services, no matter where you are in the world, the devices and the equipment you have, these expensive equipment and, of course, your systems that you have in place need to be repaired. They need to be fitted with new parts, new components. And when they reach the life end where it cannot be repaired anymore, where of course you don't want those rare earths to simply be thrown away as in the too hard basket. So there are many, many products that are at the moment been seen as too difficult, but ironically, a great way to access some of the materials. So hand back to you, anybody, if you want to pick up on some of the other aspects of the electronic waste that we're looking at.
Sure. I think there's a couple of elements there, and I think you touched on in the presentation as well, Vin, about microfactories and how that fits into the picture, and regional remote manufacturing, and then the basis for that is what materials we're actually trying to recover from e-waste. And But for us, one of the places that we really do focus on and where we start from is what product we're actually trying to make out of it. So rather than trying to say that, well, out of plastic, we're going to make a pellet, or out of some of these alloys, like for copper, we're going to try and go back to pure copper. We're asking ourselves the questions that, what is that finished product that the market actually needs? And what's that local requirement? Be it a filament, be it a copper tin alloy, be it, as we were saying, with some of the aluminium alloys that we've been producing. Can we get there in as short a path as possible, rather than trying to create a centralized facility? Can we decentralize that process? And hence, that's where microfactories for us are core to it. And on that slide, I think the slide might have changed, but I think on that slide, we had two other companies that are part of that journey with us, where we've got TES and Renew IT. And both these companies are leaders in their space, be it either reuse of some of these IT assets, or be it from a remanufacturing perspective. And with some of these devices, it's interesting. I think we were having this conversation last night, that where the complexity of the devices is such that we accept that it's going to be an entire global supply chain that's required to manufacture it. But when it comes to recycling, it'll be one facility that will be able to reform it into the different products. But we're trying to flip that and saying that, no, it's a microfactory that can actually take different parts of it. One might process the glass on your mobile phone screens and make industrial ceramics out of it. The next part might be focused directly on batteries, where we're making cobalt or graphite or some of these other critical materials that are needed from it. But each business then can specialize on each of its areas. But I guess I might leave it there. There is, I guess, a lot that we could unpack in it.
Absolutely. And look, in the interest of time, we will finish up here. But I think I did want to give one last word to both Michael and Andrew in terms of where they see the vision for the world of manufacturing in their own sectors, whether it's about steel production or indeed, Andrew, in your case, around green ceramics.
Yeah, Veena, as I said before, steel is one of the big problematic industries to decarbonise. So getting on that journey and working with people like Veena to find solutions. I think the other side of, I guess, our vision is really around that resource recovery, and how do we stop using virgin raw materials and start converting all these products, or getting the valuable elements out of the products that are going to landfill. Maybe quickly, just one area where we have also worked with Veena is printer cartridges. So they're predominantly, again, plastic. The toner's iron, which you need critical element, main element in steel. So you've got carbon, hydrogen and iron. And we've done an industrial scale trial of with one of their other partners to mix those with one of our other waste streams that we can use in the furnaces, charge carbon. And you know, just again, our little operation, if we went down that track, would prevent something like 10 million printer cartridges going to landfill. So there's just all these valuable elements, and how do we use smart people like our friends at UNSW to find ways to recover those resources. The world's got limited resources.
Thanks, Michael. My vision is a bold one. There's textile waste across the globe, and people don't see it as a resource. They don't understand how you can unlock that value. We could put a microfactory at every landfill where textiles are currently going to the ground as waste, and transform that into a building product that go into any home or any commercial premises across the world. I'd like to see that happen in my lifetime. I'm sure the guys share my vision, so that's where I'd like to see it go.
Thank you. Thanks. Please join with me in thanking our panelists, Andrew, Michael, and Anirban. Thank you. I'd like to request and see if our team is ready to invite the last speaker is also going to be saying and joining us remotely. His name is Praveen Nagrale, and Praveen's the head of business development at Shikra Polyplast, and he's going to be joining us shortly on Zoom, I believe. So I'll hand over to our capable team back in the Ivy area. I guess if someone in the meantime wants to have a look at these green ceramic tiles, I think Andrew was a bit too modest. I've never seen him being that modest before, but have a look. He's got these for us. And back there.
Praveen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. No
And
worries.
everybody can hear you as well, so we are good to go.
Sure. Okay, let me share my screen. Can you allow me to share my screen? Hi. I just need to share my screen. Can someone allow me to share? Yeah. Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Praveen Nagrale. I take part of Sri Chakra Polyplast. Today, I'll be speaking on sustainable plastics, but as you know, and the previous speakers have spoken about the recyclability and the use of the plastic and deriving value from the trash. So today in India, we've built a recycling facility, which is a food grade recycling facility, where the plastic scrap high value is added, and how a value is added so that it can be upcycled and plastic can be recycled in multiple loops so that our valuable resources are saved. So this is my objective of presenting and how we develop this overall process. I'll be like to guiding you, and then how we can help Australia to get this PCR material, which is all people are talking about sustainability. How to get this. So before that, I like to just give brief because few of them from India and from Australia like to know how Indian recycling works and what are the challenges, because we have achieved some milestones and how we have overcome them. So today I will be talking about the conventional recycling and its challenge, what we have today and across some parts of globe as well. And what are the advanced recycling and what is the difference between food grade recycling? Because we all speak about recycling, but yes, everyone does recycling. But what is the difference between actual food grade recycling and how to add the valued products for it? And also its future prospects. So conventionally in India, I think the recycling is typically done in a small scale industry with a small minimum setup. So that was all an objective of recycling with a manual sorter, inferior washing lines and all those things. So when it comes to, and these facilities are not ESG compliance and traceability. So when value added products, like if you look at the brands who are trying to use this product, they need a very high quality product. Also, it should be ESG compliant. And also the purity of the material has to be that part so that it can be recycled multiple times. See, what happens generally in recycling is, if there are, I think, polymer people, maybe from polymer expert, there are multiple polymers, but from a layman, it always looks like a plastic. And they don't understand multiple HDP, PP, PET plastics. And sometimes they mix the plastic and then they say the quality of plastic is bad. But generally the quality of plastic is not bad. It is the way you sort it and segregate it, because every polymer has its own properties and for which they are built for. So we have to segregate properly. So that is a critical part of one of the recycling process. So all of them who do advanced recycling should focus on automated recycling as well as high quality recycling. So this is just generally the way how the conventional and advanced recycling works out. I've just given you, I think not going much into detail. So what happens is when you look at, so when you want to high-end product, So it has to be high quality. Then that is how the brands or any brands like beverage companies or any FMCG companies, they will like to use PCR so that it didn't affect their existing product. So what about the food grade recycling? The food grade recycling, just to let you know that we are the first in India to have this food grade recycling setup for RPET. So what challenges? We had been almost 10 years old into the recycling. So the way we developed this recycling and we got up to just 2 years before, no one could thought that someone could really build a food grade recycling facility in India. And we are proud to say that we have built this facility in India. And now we are also expanding globally. So that I will cover you in the next slides as well. So what is needed for building a food grade recycling facility? First, the input feed stock has to be controlled. You just can't have anything coming up. So that is what I want to say. It has to be segregated properly. And the people who understands polymer, they should be experts of polymer who understand this polymer. They should not blend any other material so that volatiles or impurities are there. So this is the first important part. Second thing, it should be advanced sorting, which I've already spoken to you. Also the extrusion lines, it's just not a normal extrusion lines. These extrusion lines also should have a capability to decontaminate the lines, which we have installed in our facility, so that it should be EFSA or USFDA approved lines. Okay, additives also, if you look at sometime like someone was saying in the filament or something, you want to add an additive, that also has to be a food grade. So, that is all food grade compliant as well. Apart from that, this has to have a complete manufacturing facility, because recycling, whenever we talk about recycling, we all look at the dirt, it comes from the road waste or a crab waste or a municipal waste. There are a lot of impurities and unhygienic things comes in. So this facility, when you do this, this also has to be keep in mind that it is going for food contact. The facility has to be upgraded as per food grade manufacturing facility only. So the way we have a normal food grade processing. So this is all about the recycling facilities which we need for food grade. I think what is the demand. I think most of us already know, but just to give a glimpse that I think Europe, that there is a taxation on the plastics to use PCR, and I think in last time in Global Summit as well, Paris Agreement, everyone talking about sustainable plastics and all those things. So this becomes a very crucial when we want to add the plastics. So you should have a very high quality of plastics coming into your packaging. So this plays a very crucial role. So we are proud that we were able to build that, and I think we will be having much more facilities coming up in India as well. I think this is just a targets what brands are also selling, not only regulations, but other companies are also committing to the PCR content plastics, which they need plastic. And today you might be seeing the plastic PCR prices. Generally, the trend was, we have the PCR material at a cheaper price in India compared to virgin. But the effort, what is needed to really make a good quality plastics, that is a little bit higher to make it sustainable as well. So just about our company, I think we've spoken about how we do advanced recycling and then food grade recycling. So I think we were proud to say that this is what we call bottle to bottle recycling. So what we think is, suppose a PET bottle is there, what we collect from the club site or a municipal waste. That bottle is back recycled into bottle with 100% resin of recycled resin. So that is the objective. It's called bottle to bottle recycling. So we were able to set up this facility here in India. So that is first thing of our kind. Also, because of the regulations, we are the first company who have EFSA, European Food Safety Authority approval as well. We are also part of the FSSI, that is Indian Government Food Safety Authority India body, who defines the structure, what is needed for PCR. And we were the first, in fact, only one company in India who has this authorization to produce food grade recycled pellets. Also looking at polyolefins, like a lot of brands like shampoo, Unilever or anyone, L'Oreal, if you look at any recycled material, it smells. So we have got a new technology which is called deodorizing technology, where the polymers which we produce, it doesn't smell. So this can go into high-end application like your cosmetics, so that your PCR targets, everyone's brands can use this resin for the PCR targets. Generally, this was a challenge till now in industry because the orderless resin was not available. And because of this, all the brands who had the targets to achieve PCR like a recycled material into the packaging, that was a challenge in cosmetic industry. But we have overcome that, and now we were able to sell orderless resin, recycled resin, so that they can go into the packaging as well. I think the sorting technologies, even India, any innovation which is happening in recycling, Sri Chakra in India, we are the first to implement that in India. So even like 10, 15 years back when we started, 10 years back. So, that time the polymer technology was not introduced in India. So we were the first to introduce polymer sorting technology also long back. So these are a couple of innovations which is definitely needed in this recycling industry to develop, to add a high value product. Currently, what is happening is most only the high value product, some material is getting segregated, rest all goes into landfill, or that is not properly recycled, and goes to a low end product and then ends of the life. But if you continue to do this, the valuable material of polymers or fossil fuel will get into, and then we'll not have plastics. Yes, some people say plastic is bad and all those things, but I don't think so. There is any replacement for plastic as of now when you look at it at a broader frame. So only way is to do is sustainable recycling and a proper recycling, so that this material can be used in multiple times. Yeah. Also, I think I've just spoken to you, like what we do with the brands. If someone really interested in working, what we do is we do collaboration to make sure if there are PCR challenges, because PCR is multiple, when a recycled material comes, because they had been handling virgin material. So we guide them how to handle the virgin material, all the brands. Also, we're more focused just not supplying the recycled material, but also providing them the sustainable goals. Like we achieve their EPR targets, we try to connect with them to give the recycled material. Also, when it goes to the shelf for a marketing team, because once they see recycled material, they may be having some apprehensions of how to develop the product to go into the market with the brands. That is what we have been collaborating. We are working more than 45 brands now across India and globe, where our recycled material is supplied. So that is what we have got, this knowledge base, where how do we educate the brands, because some brands are very new in using a PCR material into the prime packaging. And we walk through the overall journey from the inception of the idea to the development and going into the market. And always we facilitate that closed loop recycling, as I was trying to mention you, like bottle to bottle. Wherever a bottle is laid or littered, we try to collect that bottle and also get back into the same brand's packaging, so that it gets into recycling of closed loop. So obviously these are the certifications which we already have, and so this is like the old slide, so underway. So we have got these certificates as well for the new facility which we have developed. Also, we are into ocean bond plastics. So if someone is keen into ocean bonds plastic, because this is what we are trying to save the water plastics getting into the water bodies. So there's a new initiative which we have taken. So we're almost collecting 200 tons of plastics a month from the ocean bodies as well. Yeah, this is all about from my side. What I was trying to tell, if anyone has any questions, I can answer them. No problem. Yeah, so
Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear.
Yeah. Sorry, there's great enthusiasm in the room. Everyone is so appreciative of your presentation. There was a request that you put your contact details on the screen. If you could, do you have your contact details for those in the room who are interested? Oh, we've got someone here who can share it. So that's great. Oh, there we go. They're up as well.
Yeah.
We've got it. Okay. Thank you so very much for your presentation. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me, people. I know there's not many of you left here. I think we'll probably try and not hold you back too long. I think the food's waiting out there, so give us a couple of minutes. Looks like I have to introduce myself. This is me. What I'll do is I might just skip the slide. I have some panel members joining us from outside of Sydney, that is. Jannat Maqbool, I'll have the other three members join in. I wasn't sure, I just wanted to make sure we can get them online first, please. Give us a minute. So Jannat is there. Can we get all the panel members on the screen, please? Yeah, three of them, all three, you can get them on the same screen to begin with. Yeah. Hi, Janet. Thanks. I really appreciate your patience. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Excellent. No, thank you so much for that. I'm sure we have all the three members here. Ashok, can you please join me here, please? I have the fourth member of the panel here with me, so Ashok from Infosys. I'll quickly go through one by one there. So we have four members on the panel. I'll start with Jannat, of course. She is the Executive Director for the Smart City Council for Australia and New Zealand. We have Sean Gallagher, who is a principal and for Populous, a company, it's a global architecture, design, and practice. I have Sean here. He'll bring a very different perspective to the conversation we're going to have this afternoon. Ashok Kumar, of course, we have Ashok Mysore. I do apologize. Ashok Mysore from Infosys is the regional head for Infosys. And we have Abhishek Singh on the left at the bottom there. He is the Director for Technology Convergence, APAC. And basically, he comes from Jacobs, of course. What I'll do is I'll just go through each one of them and I'll allow them to introduce themselves. Sean, can I start with you there, please?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to share my screen? Is that what we're doing?
Okay. I might just move the screen. Can I actually put the screen for the stadium there, please? Can we share the screen, the stadium screen, please?
You see that?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we can see that. You can go ahead. Yeah.
That's me. I think I'm sharing. So I'm sorry I had to change the order of things, but we're, as Anand has just introduced, we're a global sports architecture firm, and I'm in Brisbane and Asia. Brisbane looks after our Asian market, and we've been involved in India since probably around 2008. We currently employ about 25 people in the Indian studio. We started looking at India as interest to us around the time of the 2010 Delhi Games. That's what initially piqued our interest. And we don't usually have our overseas office as a production office, but we were very patient with India. This project on the screen, it's the Modi Stadium. It's the largest cricket stadium in the world, which we completed in 2020. And we found that the caliber of staff in India was so high that we didn't have work in India for many years, but we wanted to build the studio. So we had these guys working on our projects in other parts of the world, very successfully to be able to work remotely, particularly during COVID. And we've now just started to pick up quite a bit of work, and we're very proud of this facility that we designed in Ahmedabad. I'm just going to talk briefly about the environmental initiatives that we now are quite commonplace in stadia. This is the Sydney Olympic Stadium that we designed. Now, this is over 25 years old as a design, and at the time, some of these initiatives were considered quite revolutionary. So things like recycling rainwater to irrigate the pitch, and also
Shane, you may want to change the slide. Yep, that's it.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. So is that okay? So recycling water to irrigate the pitch, and also we use that recycled water to flush the toilets. Natural ventilation, passive ventilation, using recycled materials where we can. These were 25 years ago, nobody had really done this sort of stuff. The Sydney Olympics was, the ambition was to make it the greenest games ever. And it was, but these initiatives now are quite commonplace, and the technology didn't exist back then with photovoltaic cells that we now have, wind turbines to generate energy. So not only does the stadiums we design nowadays have the ability to generate enough energy for themselves to operate, we also put energy back into the grid, because these facilities often have large roof areas that we can use to capture ultraviolet light. So it's a very interesting aspect of design that we've helped develop and initiate.
Terrific. Now, just on that, Shane, I was wondering whether, like, how you're carrying out, I mean, obviously this was done well before 2000, that is, for the Olympic Stadium in Sydney.
Yes.
We do believe that you have continued to implement this across the stadiums that you've been doing around the world, of course, including the Narendra Modi Stadium that we discussed earlier. To what extent are we actually extrapolating the knowledge that we gained from this stadium over the last 20 years? Are you able to share something in that perspective?
Yeah, look, as we move forward, the environment has become a very important issue, as we know. To be honest, with Stadia, the environmental design used to be quite a tokenistic thing because of the sporadic use of the stadiums. Now it's become front and center of stadium design. We're seeing an increasingly more use of timber, for example, recycled materials, materials that in a stadium might have a life of 40 to 50 years, for example, but we're now designing them so that at the end of the stadium's life, those materials can be reused in another building. So it's become a very important part of the design process. It's probably the most important part of the design process. Brisbane is going to host the 2032 Olympic Games. Obviously, we're hoping to get some of the work out of that, but those games, if not carbon neutral, they're going to be carbon positive. So it's a defining element of the buildings we design these days.
Perfect. Now, I do remember you also shared in one of the conversations that I was having with you, when you are actually designing these facilities, you have to also take into consideration aspects beyond the stadium. For example, the transportation, the access to the facility. Do you want to share something about that?
Yeah, look, that's a very important part of what we're doing. You see that in the old stadia in America, old football stadiums, they have acres of car parking, and these facilities are often on the edge of a city. We like inner city stadiums so that they're contributing to the local economy. It's not just the event itself. There's a broader economic opportunity with hotels, bars and restaurants and so forth. And given the nature of that inner city location, we can't have huge car parks. So if we can get 80 to 85% of our patrons arriving by public transport, be it trains or buses, that's a great outcome for us. We don't want acres of car parking. It just doesn't work, we find.
Oh, that sounds great. Okay. What we could do is we could now, I just wanted to touch on what Sean was doing in terms of what Populous was doing across the world. But what I want to do now is go back to the panel with the three members on the screen there for me, please. I would like to invite Jannat to introduce herself, and we'll go after that.
Hi, everybody. I hope the audio is working fine. I'm over here. I'm over here in New Zealand, and as per the introduction, I'm the interim executive director at Smart Cities Council Australia, New Zealand. We've been around. We celebrated actually 10 years globally in February this year, and so we're with offices in India, Southeast Asia, and the US. And obviously across Australia and New Zealand. And I became involved with the council in 2018 and took on the role of country director for New Zealand for 2020 and 2021. And then Adam Beck, who actually founded Smart Cities Council Australia and New Zealand, moved on to do some other things in February, and I've been in the interim executive director role since then, and really enjoying it. But I'll tell you a little bit more about Smart Cities Council. So globally, our whole focus is about bringing the public and private sector together to collaborate more and engage with obviously a key stakeholder being the community, to think about how you can leverage technology and data for more livable, workable and sustainable cities. And that covers people, place and planet. And the way that we look at it is project by project and place by place. So it's very I guess, customized to where we're looking at focusing, and through our member network, which includes solution providers as well as the demand side. We actually look to, in for example, the digital twin space, we're looking to really catalyze the marketplace and have a deep dive into things that need to be considered along the way when you leverage technology and data, for example, privacy. And so we're very big on data leadership. Our three core programs at present are capability development through the Academy, and we run a Smart Cities Certified Practitioner program, which is available online and on demand. And that's in the capability, and we're building out Academy with some additional offerings specifically around digital twin and data leadership as well, but also other things. The second one is data leadership through the Digital Twin Hub. So we run the region, the Australia New Zealand Digital Twin Hub at digitaltwinhub.org. And then the third is Future of Place. So what does the future of place look like when you bring together technology, data, the public-private sector, encourage greater collaborations, encourage a lens of impact and looking across the ecosystem, and importantly, putting people at the center of city design, and again, that leveraging of technology and data, and data leadership talks about trust and ethics and governance as three core pillars. And quite very, very important to us when we're looking at leveraging technology and data, that it's actually tech and data for good. So I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Jonathan. That's perfect. So what I might come to Ashok. Ashok, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So my name is Ashok Mysore. I'm the Vice President at Infosys and the Regional CEO here. Along with that, I also wear the industry chair for digital and ICT at AIIBC. So I've been with the firm for about 18 plus years. For those of you who don't know Infosys, we are a digital and technology system integration organization, globally about $16.5, $17 billion in revenue, about 300,000 plus employees. So we have been in Australia for about a couple of decades. We basically, do technology and use technology to solve problems right across multiple industries. So in terms of, today's topic, I guess engineering is one of about 16 different capability units that Infosys has, and it's probably roughly around $1.5 billion long, big. And so we primarily when we look at engineering, there are roughly about 3 areas that we actually delve in. One is basically around integrated product design, and that includes everything around the development life cycle of it. The second area is basically around IoT and sensors. And that's probably more around the emerging technologies that falls kind of in line with what Jannat was talking around, digital twins and sustainable infrastructure. That's just one of them. And the third one is core to engineering, which is around network and 5G and the network elements, the software-defined networks, etc. So those roughly, I guess, from a sustainability perspective, is what we do.
Excellent. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Abhishek, could you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Anand. It's really good to be here, taking part in this panel discussion as part of this summit, especially since we're looking at celebrating the 75th anniversary of India's independence. Now, perhaps quickly introducing Jacobs to our audience. Many of them might be aware of Jacobs Engineering, but we are a global firm. We operate in the infrastructure engineering consulting space. We have a large footprint, presence in about 40 nations, employee base of about 55,000, annual revenue of about $15 billion. So a large entity operating, as I said, in infrastructure, national security, advanced manufacturing, health and science, and a number of adjacent industries. And within that, my role in Australia is that of the Director for Technology Convergence. And in my role, I'm really focused on bringing in emerging disruptive technologies into the solutions that we provide to many of our asset-intensive clients. And typically these asset-intensive clients, many of those are critical infrastructure providers, and they're looking to gain better value from their assets. And through the solutions that we offer, we are able to help them get to that outcome. But including that, it's interesting to note that increasingly most of our critical infrastructure clients are now talking about sustainability and climate change and how that is front and center of their minds. And therefore, Jacobs also is quite focused on providing the right outcomes on that front. It might be pertinent to mention, and I can sort of throw a little bit of more light on this in our subsequent discussion, Anand, but Jacobs is actually repositioning itself from being an infrastructure engineering firm across to being a solutions provider. And this is basically driven by our reading of some of the mega trends that we see around the world, including a need for us to be instrumental in providing solutions for climate response, social value and social equity challenges around rapid urbanization, and of course, also looking at how we can leverage the rise of technology to deliver some of those solutions that our clients might be looking for.
No, terrific. No, thanks for that, Abhishek. Actually, that's a journey. Some of the companies that I was associated with, Hitachi, Siemens, GE, these guys kind of started on this journey about 10 years back, continuously developing and actually positioning themselves to be more a solutions provider rather than just a technology player. And obviously, the good thing we need to understand here, the important thing here is the large corporations that I'm sharing here with you, Infosys, Jacobs, Populous, they are organizations who are actually making a difference out there. They're actually putting the real products out there. They are incorporating what we are talking about, the concepts we are discussing in the room today. These guys are actually doing it out there. And they're also a platform for several of the startups, the new companies that are coming on board, for them to consider collaboration, work with these people, and position themselves in specific areas that they believe that they can add value to these large organizations. This marriage is happening as we speak, and we cannot forget the value these large organizations have made, the difference these guys have made over the decades. So in that context, that's the reason I wanted to bring some of these big players into the conversation today. So Jannat, I want to get back to you. I want to throw this question at you, but Sean, if you're still there, and Abhishek, of course, Ashok, either of you, we just touched on the point of trends. I know we spoke about opportunities. We spoke about some of the examples what Sean was sharing earlier. In terms of trends and in the infrastructure space specifically, I keep coming back to infrastructure because it is by a large focus. Even the Global Innovation Hub has identified infrastructure as one of the major contributors to social economy. And basically, that's what actually is going to make a huge difference over the next few decades, especially now. Every country is talking about investing in infrastructure to actually kickstart the economy up there. So within the context of infrastructure, in terms of trends, I know you touched on digital twin there, Janat. Do you want to expand on that, or do you want to share, because you are the council where several councils in India, we call them municipalities, and if they want to transcend themselves into a smart city, they have to be talking to certain bodies. And I believe, Janat, you are in a great position. You're talking to these councils. Do you want to share some of those requirements that are coming out from the councils out there? Janat, did you get my question?
Yes, I did. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So just if I talk about the council's question first, and then I'll go back to the digital twin. So we talk about that. So one of the key reasons that Smart Cities Council, I guess, does what it does and it plays in the spaces that we play is because we felt that and it's not just us, there are other organizations that know this as well, that there's quite a disconnect between demand and supply when you, in our area of focus, which is solutions for smart cities, right? So, and not only is there a disconnect, we're also finding that, and that's why one of our key streams is capability development, there is also a disconnect across the demand side as to what a smart city is. And how that actually then needs to connect with, the services provided by the public sector entity, and how it actually relates to very much their 10-year, in New Zealand, we talk about 10-year plans and 30-year plans. And so the planning, so it needs to, the concept of a smart city needs to be very much the next step, for local government and central government. And state government and in Australia as well. But and so what we're finding is those two things. So there's a lack of awareness and understanding about what a smart city is. And then even if that was there, or even as part of exploring that, there's a disconnect between what we would call solution providers that could come to the table and support that journey. And it is a journey. It's not a point in time. It's not a destination. It's an ongoing approach to leveraging technology and data for more livable, workable, and sustainables. And we talk about cities and towns and regions. So it's really about place. So we find that the work that we do in bringing the key stakeholders together around key topics of interest is quite effective in enabling the demand side to really socialize with the supply side. So that then the conversations are starting at a point where they're getting to know each other, and it's not directly around, you have something to sell me or I have something to sell you. And it becomes a very relationship building activity. And so you build the relationship, you're listening to the same conversations as part of these, we call them task forces, but you could call them initiatives. So everybody's at the table and we're talking about something that we're very, very passionate about as individuals. So some examples there would be, we've had recently and still have a Brisbane 2032 task force, and that's looking at what the Olympics could do around digital and data, and the potential of digital and data for the Olympics in 2032. And so that was a collaboration over a number of months, and we released 2 resources to market, and obviously to key stakeholders involved in the whole process of bringing the games to Brisbane and winning that, and then what happens next. And that was around the table. There was both the demand side and the supply side, and then they came together and they convened around that topic. Another one is the digital twin, and this is where I'll bring it back to that conversation. And so the digital twin started off with the journey to date started off with a task force which had representatives from both across Australia and New Zealand, that were either working in already in this space, had a solution in this space, and the working in could be actually councils as well. So a number of councils, or all councils, pretty much will have a GIS system. And so, the visualization component was already there, but then there's the education and awareness around what a real digital twin actually is. And then if you refer to the Centre for Digital Built Britain and what a connected digital twin is. So the task force was, again, building relationships with key stakeholders around a topic that was of interest. So there was the, already working, already doing something, already has a solution. But then there were also people there that were interested in the topic and wanted to know how they could leverage that for their situation, their place, or their project. And then there were those that knew the potential and just wanted to connect then with how do we move forward. And so all of them, and over many, many months, which actually kicked off in 2019, came together to develop a blueprint that we released to market last year, the Australia-New Zealand Digital Twin Strategy Blueprint. And along the way, we launched the Digital Twin Hub that I've previously mentioned. Along the way, we released a guidance note, and then we've obviously done some events along the way, online and in person. But what it was is what it was about was catalyzing the marketplace. And so at the same time, we launched the challenge. And that was really based on feedback to say, this bringing together of people around the same topic is fantastic. We're building relationship. The conversation is so much easier now. We can really see where it's relevant. We can see the solution providers partnering with us to develop business cases. We can see that we need to build our internal capability, and there's some support around that. But how do we now, who can handhold us while we actually take the risk on progressing with some of these things? And I think that's the situation with any leveraging of technology and data when you're using public money. And remember, though, in Australia, there's been lots of investment from federal government as well. And so there's a bit of an advantage over there that hasn't happened in New Zealand. And we all know in India, of course, the promise there around smart cities and smart city investment. So where we're sort of, to answer the question in quite a short way, is that the demand side needs the supply side, but they need to be at the table together. And it's not about a sell and a buy. It's actually about a relationship that comes together around the impact that they want to make. And then it really needs to be about working through that as a journey, and building a partnership and a collaboration. And other stakeholders as well are key to that as well. We launched 2 new membership categories in 2021 when I came on board, which was around a knowledge and research partner member category, and also startup. So we need the innovation at the coalface, innovation that's actually building in, for example, privacy by design into solutions. And we also need the research and the academic component. And so there's some key stakeholders that really need to come to that table together with the traditional demand and supply. And I feel like with that approach, we're going to progress. And the smart cities that we're talking about isn't when you Google smart cities and someone's standing on the edge of some ledge and there's some fantastically sci-fi city right in front of them. It's very much about place and what is the problem in that place, or an opportunity in that place, and taking a journey along with all the stakeholders.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I think some of the key words you use there in terms of collaboration, working together, and actually addressing the specific needs of the community. I think that's so critical for this whole thing to happen. Ashok, I just wanted to check with you on that, because in terms of applying some of these concepts in what you guys do, can you share an example, please?
Yeah, sure. So if we actually look at, let me actually elaborate on what we do or how we get actually involved around the digital twins itself. And, from our perspective, we believe that, digital twin, of course, has got application right across the board. But the way we have organized ourselves is looking at, let's say, for example, a product twin. And that can be anything from, jet engine. How do you actually use digital twins to, maybe, I guess, redesign the blade, which can actually, which has got a bend of about, a couple of seconds, more than what actually is in production. How do you actually simulate that? What is the impact of that, etc. So that's on a product one. So other ones are like, say, for example, process digital twin. I think we heard a lot from Veena and most of the other very eminent speakers. Simple things is around, how do you do actually vaccine? vaccine design? How do you actually create new vaccines? So you can actually do these things through digital twin modeling, right? So application is, it could be, solving an end-to-end. I mean, I think we heard a lot about, trying to actually solve the entire sustainability thing as a value chain, right? So you can't actually solve individual pieces. You have to actually look at it holistically. And in that sense, I think, when we actually look at the application aspect of it, so if you just take a chiller plant, for example, I mean, we can actually integrate what was spoken about design of the chiller plant. You can actually look at the water treatment aspects of it. How does it actually consume energy? So the entire ecosystem, and how do you actually bring all of that to bear through technology, right? So those things we are actually looking into. Couple of things which I want to just touch upon, what Janat was mentioning there is, while we embark on this, things which we actually stumble upon is data and interoperability aspects of it, the consistency around it. So, if New South Wales, a digital, spatial twin project is being done here, Victoria's Fisherman Bends is actually being done, there is no common blueprint or a standard, national standard on which you can actually do things. So while we are actually looking in Australia to take the digitally built Britain blueprints, how do we actually do that? So if that is there, I think, organizations like us can actually work with academicians, work with Smart Cities Council, who actually understand this, and then use technology to implement some of those.
Yeah, I think, and that's the stuff what Janat was talking about, trying to put together a digital twin strategy that can be kind of applied across regions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's quite valuable. And also, since you mentioned about the machines, I remember G and Predix going back, what they tried. I think one of the biggest hurdles they had going back, it was 7-8 years now, the biggest challenges they had was the ability to actually extrapolate this, to be able to commercialize what they were working with. But Predix was a great product to begin with. Yeah. Abhishek, I'll just come to you for one last question for this afternoon. Can you share with us an example of how Jacobs is applying what we're talking about in terms of technologies and the sustainability aspects of that within a project?
Sure, Anand, can do. I'd like to just touch upon a couple of things that Janat said and also Ashok said, and build that into responding to your question around the example. And these things were, Janat mentioned that it's a bit of a journey that you take the client on, and both Ashok as well as Janat spoke of building a relationship and that demand-supply mismatch. The way we look at it, as an organization, Jacobs is focused on getting into a partnership with our clients and doing a little bit of co-creation rather than sort of saying, this is your need and that's our solution. And a great example of this is a large infrastructure client that was operating in the critical infrastructure space. They, coming out of COVID, were hurting really, and their main concern was that some of their assets could possibly lead to some operational safety risks eventuating. And therefore, we had to come to the party and meet the client where they were at. So, a situation like that, there's no point starting the conversation with digital and smart technologies. You really need to listen and understand exactly what the client is saying, be empathetic, and then try to co-create and come up with options and solutions. So as we went into that situation and we created a bit of a roadmap on how we could uplift their capability to manage their assets better, at that stage, we had the digital technologies actually in Horizon 3, that we would look at that in 2 or 3 years from now. But as we gained trust and we gained the confidence of the client, and we showed them real improvement by moving some simple levers around policies, procedures, frameworks, and they understood that we were a reliable partner, we were able to bring those digital elements up early. So in place of doing that in 3 years, we started doing that in about 3 to 6 months. And I think the sell of those digital tools was, again, also starting with what the client really needed. So they were looking for safety outcomes, they were looking for efficiency gains. So that's where the conversation started, bringing in instrumentation for their assets, analyzing the data that we gather from the assets, being able to provide some insights for decision making, that was all initially focused on efficiency and safety outcomes. But eventually, as we started moving the needles, we drew their attention to the sustainability outcomes as well. And now where we are at with the client is that we have a GIS-based dashboard where they can centrally monitor all their assets and not just look at it from efficiency and safety standpoint, but also get a good understanding of the environmental impact of their assets. And that's how we weaved in the sustainability angle to it. And where we want to take it is eventually create a digital twin where they can not only look at the here and now, but also be able to predict what might happen in the future and what might be the impact of certain events and incidents happening on the network of assets that they have. One final point, Anand, because I know this is the last question, and I want to kind of put it out there, and perhaps I have a little bit of a bias around security and national security, given my defense background. But whilst there's a lot of excitement around smart technologies, and I think it's well placed, and they can deliver some awesome outcomes from a sustainability standpoint, but at the same time, we need to be cognizant of vulnerabilities that smart technologies can create from a cybersecurity angle. And there's some really good guidance that's come out from the federal government on this in terms of the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. And I would suggest that this is something not just a focus of attention of critical infrastructure providers here in Australia, but given the geopolitical situation in Indo-Pacific, that's also possibly an equally important criteria or factor for infrastructure providers to consider in India. But all in all, I think in summary, there are some awesome times ahead, and technology can do a lot for us, but we just need to be mindful and strike that balance.
Thanks for that, Abhishek. I think that's a critical point. There's a whole new chapter just around that. One of the biggest challenges even I've had in my journey with large corporations, I'm sure Ashok can agree with this, the regulations, the rate at which we are innovating, the rate at which we are coming up with these technologies, the regulatory bodies, they're always going to play a catch-up game. I think one of the biggest challenges we have had is the fact that we are innovating so fast. So one of the biggest things that's coming from the governments is to try and integrate regulatory bodies into innovation, into how they're coming about developing new solutions, new products out there. There's always going to be that catch up. I think it's going to be there for some time. Ladies and gentlemen, just in the interest of time, we do apologize. We've gone over time today. We will probably wrap up the session here at this stage. Janath, Abhishek, I know Sean had to jump off there for a moment, and Ashok, thank you. Really, I do apologize. We couldn't justify what we could do today, actually, but I do apologize for some inconvenience there for you guys too. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Anand.
One second, we might have a question.
I would like to know what are the, I think, one of the 3 or 4 opportunities in Australia and India in terms of the smart cities. Because we have technologies in India, we have technologies here, but at the end of the day, it is B2B. So as a layman, I would like to know what are the top 3 or 4 opportunities.
Okay, I mean, I can, but I'll let you take one.
Yeah, so I think when you look at actually what India has actually done, I think there is some structure, and there is a method in the madness of how it has actually gone about creating priorities around the 100 smart cities, right? So where I guess there can be lessons learned is because I think Australia has actually been slightly ahead in the journey in terms of the thinking of actually creating, at least, there's a Infrastructure Australia standards, the Smart Cities Council here, who are basically driving to create certain national standards around the digital technology task force. So maybe there are lessons around the design, around standards around that, data interoperability, and doing actually digital as a first choice rather than digital by exception. So some of those things can actually be incorporated into what India is doing around the smart cities. And of course, there's learnings of the implementation part of it back into Australia in terms of scale.
Thanks for that. Actually, for your question, I mean, I just happened to have scribbled some notes. So I just realized that the smart city program for India, it works on the principle of 7 Ps. People, pedestrians, places, parking, parks, pollution, and pathways. If you heard Janat speaking earlier, she was pretty much quoting those same things. So the opportunity we have is to actually be able to introduce, that's why Sean was there earlier too, to actually be able to introduce what we are doing in terms of introducing some of these concepts within the smart cities to bring this across to India. Look, from an Indian perspective, if you look at the other things, they are talking some of the basic essential infrastructure in terms of housing, affordable housing. You look, I think we had some panel members today share about the advanced technologies they are trying to apply in that space. So there is a huge, it complements what's happening. So it's, again, bodies like us, AIIBC, we have a role to play here to actually bring these two players together and highlight those opportunities they can work together with, okay? On that note, I think we're going to close. Just before I close, I just wanted to do this. Can I have the slide, please? I wanted to quote this because I love this quote for different reasons, but I'm not a poet. I can tell you that much, but it kind of stayed with me when I read this. He's a poet, an Australian poet, Rainer Maria. The future enters into us in order to transform itself in us long before it happens. What we are trying to do, people here in this room, what Deepak was talking earlier this morning, we are trying to do some, this is a unique time. We are actually at this point, it's a unique opportunity for us to make a difference to the entire lifespan, like, for the every living being. It's not just about people. If you look at the first industrial revolution, second, we were always talking about how people can move, how people can manufacture, how people can have an affordable living. But here is an opportunity for us to not just look at it from a human's perspective, but also every living being's perspective. That's where the whole concept of ESG, the whole concept of sustainability comes in. And I thought this quote sits in well. I thought it kind of used that at the end just to kind of close up the whole session. But thank you again so much for being with us this afternoon. Thank you. Yes, please. Bishul, just do a quick word of thanks. Sorry.
Thank you, Anand, and thank you, Ashok. It was an excellent insight to the smart cities and all the opportunities. My name is Savish Vishwanathan. I am from the Australia-India Business Council. I look after the Make in India chapter. Also, I'm in the assisting Con Livisianis in the Australia-India Business Enterprise, which is the new commercial arm of Australia-India Business Council. So we had an excellent morning this morning, which is so much of things to be learned and from every one of the speakers, and particularly, and we had, even speaker from India, from Mr. Deepak Bagla, and the CEO of the Invest India, and he has given so much information about opportunities in India, how the younger generation is going to contribute to the growth of India as well as to the global economy. So that's something which is a takeaway from his talk, and especially on the clean energy program. And also we have Michael Sharp. He's not here, and I want to thank him for having a panel on that. And we had also heard from Samir Vora as to how the supply chain, there is a lot of things need to be done in terms of the renewable energy. So how Adani is doing it and how everyone else can contribute. That was a great thing which Samir Vora brought out, and it's a huge opportunity for Australia and India. Then we had also the panel of a number of people from different industries. Is Mr. Henry Sun, from Chairman of Lavo Hydrogen Technologies, Mr. Murray Ellen, from founder of the PTB Link, and Jeff Wyatt, who is the founder of Oswald. And there is a very exciting technology which is available to India in terms of prefabricated building material, in terms of plastic recycling. And we had a very, very interesting sustainability circular economy session led by Veena Sahajwala, and it's always a great pleasure to listen to her. In fact, I was telling her I would like to be a student if possible. And it brought out so much of knowledge and opportunities between Australia and India. What else? If you look at only that aspect, what a great session it was. So thank you, Veena Sahajwala, and the panelists. We have also had the pleasure of Andrew Douglas, the Chairman Managing Director of Contour Technologies, Green Energy. And we have Mr. Ian Choos from Green Steel, and Anirban Giba from Microfibers, and Michael Hallam from Energies Tech Solutions, and Janet, we heard from her on the Smart City Council from New Zealand, and Sean Gallagher from Populous, and most importantly, our own panelists, Anand Singh and Ashok Mysore. Please give them a very big hand, because there's so much knowledge any of these things bring to our, Australia-India Business Council, and then we would like to take this into commercial opportunities from B2B. And on the top of it, I would like to thank Mr. Irfan Malik, who is spearheading this Australia-India Business Council business meet, and really appreciate your leadership in this and getting together everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vishen. He's got an important portfolio of making more with India. So definitely, as we drive that engagement, there'll be a lot that we'll take from this sessions, and some of these amazing technologies which are scalable in India, we can help them accelerate as well. I want to take the opportunity, and I don't know where there was a mix-up, to invite Michael Hallam, please, to just say a few words, and what Michael has. And I would like to have Con here, if possible. Vish, if we can get Con here as well, to talk about some amazing stuff he's doing, and especially from agri to energy, so agri waste to energy. And I'm pleased, and I'm sure that we will now be driving quite a bit. And then I'm already talking to Michael about a few pilot projects as well. And I'll make sure we are also showcasing this exclusively with Deepak Wagla as well, and team tomorrow. We can work it out.
Thank you.
But I want you to share some story and what you guys do,
Yeah,
and what are some of the
worries.
things that you do as well.
Thank you, and apologies for holding you back from your lunch. I know you're probably all keen to get out. So my name's Michael. I work for a company called Energy Link Services, and we've partnered with another group called BioCare, where a number of us are involved, to really look at taking a lot of the ag waste streams that exist and turning them into fertilizer products, or at least, trying to improve soil quality or water filtration through carbon removals and biochar type technologies. We see a lot of the waste that comes out of agriculture is very good carbon source. When you harvest wheat or sugarcane, you only take a fraction of the plant. There's quite a bit left over. And there are established technologies that exist to help effectively drive off all the volatile elements, which are great. They're a great energy source, but leave carbon behind. And carbon, as we know, there's a whole problem around trying to solve climate change. It's a great way to help remove carbon from the atmosphere, but also create the types of products that are very, very good for farming and soil quality. We've seen and we've been involved with projects that are looking to produce even urea from biomass-based resources. And if you've been following urea lately, the price has gone up a couple of factors, global supply, and we don't really make a lot of urea in Australia. So, there's some quite critical components in farming supply chains that Australia is heavily exposed on, and we're working with parties to try and bring those out. And we think carbon markets can play quite an important role in that as well and help finance that. But it's really transferable to other regions. I mean, Australia has been farming for a long time, but we're not unique in that sense. There are a lot of regions that do a lot of farming, including India. India has an enormous sugarcane farming industry. And one of the main byproducts of sugarcane processing is bagasse. And there are huge opportunities to turn that into biochar, to either put back into soil. You can use it, and it was raised before around carbon sources in steel. You can use those types of carbon sources as carbon sources in steel and many different types of agricultural products. So we've looked at projects in Southeast Asia, areas like taking rice husk and looking to do those same kind of things. There's no reason you can't apply the same types of things in India. Particularly, I think sugarcane is probably the easiest place to start. But also India's got such a great engineering and technical resource, that this is a pyrolysis and effectively low oxygen combustion has been around for millennia. It's not a new technology, but I'm sure with a little bit of kind of Indian magic, you can refine it to the level and produce it at a scale that allows you to have, real meaningful impact. So that's what we do. More than happy to chat about it, but also wary of holding everyone up for their lunch.
Ron has been dealing with, and we've hosted a sugar delegation as well. So definitely something which would love to take it forward with Michael. We'll have a specific engagement with Deepak as well. I've spoken to them. They're keen to, and there are multiple areas that he's, the biochar is one. But yeah, you want to talk a little bit as well what we are trying to do in that space and how we can leverage this agri to energy opportunity.
The main issue that we have is productivity, and the inputs in Australia are much more expensive than the inputs in countries like India. But the main aim is to be able to use the fertilizers to be able to create that extra output. The main thing that we've noticed in the farming sector here in Australia is that over time we've been able to improve the way that we farm with minimum tillage and utilising less and less water and using practices that have been around for many, many years. And only now we're starting to look at how do we take that to the next stage using biogas and biomasses and fertilisers and just taking that into account and creating better yields, which is the key factor. What's happening around the world is you can't expand a country like India. It's got a certain mass and that's it.
Yeah.
You just got to improve the productivity within the country itself, and utilising methods like you're talking about is going to not only impact on India, it'll impact on the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael, thank you again for taking time.
My pleasure.
Pleasure, and we'll stay in touch, and I look forward to taking you and taking you personally as well to India very soon. Thank you. Thank you all. I think you are just away from lunch. Please enjoy your lunch. Stick around, network, and that'll be kind of the concluding part of the summit. Please stay in touch with us online through our channels. We will be pursuing, this is just a spark-off session. We'll have very sector-specific, engagement happen, various kinds of events we have planned as well, and also delegations, sector-specific delegations to India, vice versa as well. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.